what we're hearing is that President Donald Trump has ordered the U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, to launch major retaliatory strikes against Iran after 2 U.S. service members were killed and another was reported missing in an Iranian missile and drone attack on the Muwafaq Salti air base in Jordan. We're hearing that President Trump told CENTCOM to open the gates of hell. And as I said before, that is the closest that we've come to an announcement. Remember, we've been saying in this space, World War III will not be announced. It will not be announced. But the closest we've come. According to what we're hearing, Trump directed the military to open the gates of hell, which signal an immediate and forceful military response against Iran. As we speak, Iran is being bombed in a way that we haven't seen in the last few months. U.S. forces carried out airstrikes on military facilities in southern Iran, including areas associated with missile, drone, and military infrastructure. The stated objective was to degrade Iran's ability to threaten U.S. forces and disrupt shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran denied that the U.S. strikes caused significant casualties, and there's a lot more to be said about that. But if we were to, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most likely, if we were to name or to determine if we were in World War III, 1 would equal routine military tensions, 5 would be a major regional war, and 10 would be a full World War III involving principal global powers. Well, I know that for me, I'm saying it's 10, but I know that I'm hearing the experts, and this is what should frighten you if you're not on my page saying it's 10, where so many are saying it is 7.5 to 8. These are the experts, which means here we are. That reflects the seriousness of the simultaneous crises involving the nuclear armed states and the global alliances that we're seeing right now. There are so many countries involved in war as we speak, not just Iran, but in wars across the world. Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Israel, United States, Jordan, Bahrain, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and then we say NATO, Russia, China, Turkey, because we're saying NATO. So that's all of Europe. So this is where we are. It's a crisis. For us, the question is, what do we do? We're going to take a break. And it's a day after the big football match. Yeah, it was the most exciting one so far. I've been watching, you know where we stand politically and all of this. But yesterday we watched for Saka and for Rashford and for Bellingham and for Mbappe. We watched for those young Africans who are on those two teams that we didn't even bother to name. And, so we were cheering for Mbappe on the one side, on Saka on the other side. It wasn't about the game. It wasn't about the teams. It was about these young men who have come under so much racial vitriol and violence, both in France and from Europe generally. In the United Kingdom, it's the worst racial violence against these young soccer players. You hear me now about soccer. Now, where did I get that? It's because I'm saying soccer, don't it? These young football players that really has turned into something unbelievable. But we're not surprised at what we see coming out of Britain. Not surprised at all. But congratulations to Saka. Did you see the match, Peter? No, you didn't. It was the best one of the entire. Have you heard about it?
Yeah, no, I saw the highlights.
Yeah, 10 goals in all. Yeah. But, so I was screaming for Saka on the one hand and Mbappe on the other hand. Yeah. And of course, when Bellingham came on in the last few minutes, yeah. So congratulations. We've been talking about these young men. And I hope, though, that what they have learned through all of this, that they'll be able to lift many, many others up and carry them with them. This is my hope and my dream for these young football players. All right, so quickly, at 6:38, last week, Peter and myself, I dragged Peter into this conversation about the 30-day that the Minister of Energy gave to the Jamaica Public Service, the 30-day deadline to submit a report regarding the total blackout that happened on June 5. Power was restored June 6. We should have heard about the report on the, what date was that? The 13th, but we didn't hear anything. Or was it the 13th? No, because we were on the 12th, so it was a week before. It was a Monday before, which was about the 8th or 9th. But what's interesting is that, so we raised the question in this space, and we did that every 15 minutes for the entire program or thereabouts. Before the day was out, the minister had responded. And I don't know if you're comfortable with the response from the minister. But what I understand is, and what I'm noting is how lazy journalism and our journalists are in Jamaica. And I'm talking about my colleagues. This is laziness at many, many different levels. Because when the blackout happened, the JPS came out and they said, it wasn't even a good 10 minutes after. The first report from the JPS when the blackout happened was that it is lightning. And we all came out with one voice and said, stop your foolishness. The entire island, blackout for 8 hours. And you come out not even 15 minutes after to tell us that it's lightning caused it? All right, so we dismissed that. The JPS submitted a report to the OUR and to the minister, which was how a few days after. That was rejected. And the minister said, listen, we give you 30 days. We said in this space that is foolishness, that what they're doing is kicking the can down the road. Now that 30 days came and went, and nobody said anything. We raised it here immediately after the 30 days passed, because we're on air once per week. And we were told before the day was out, Sunday evening. We raised it last Sunday morning. We were told Sunday evening that the report was submitted. It was submitted on time, and that the report points to lightning. And journalism has done nothing about it. Our journalists are whining and half naked at Sumfest. I'm saying what I'm saying because we are in serious times and it seems as if we do not care. Our journalists are partying, whether it is hard news journalists, soft news journalists, environmental journalists. Our journalists are partying. Karimak must answer some questions. UTech and wherever our students are learning journalism must answer some questions. Our media houses, which are owned and controlled by the oligarchy, is not going to do it. But journalism must do it. Our journalists must take a stand, even if you're sitting down. We reject this report from JPS. Minister Vaz, I expect better from you, sir. I reject this report from JPS. And you should too. Let us have a conversation about that another time. My first very special guest in this program, I'm very, very happy to welcome back to the Africa Forum, Dr. Darius Figuera. Let me take a quick break and come back.
Pay Uncle $1 down per 18 to 48 months credit over Lucky Dollar for furniture, appliance, and smart TVs. The time by Lucky Dollar is
now 6:42. Dr. Darius Figuera is a social researcher and author whose work focuses on power, resistance, and power relations, particularly within the Caribbean. His research critically examines colonialism, white supremacy, and dominant Western discourses while exploring liberation-centered perspectives rooted in historically marginalized, silenced knowledge systems. Dr. Figuera has published numerous books on topics including Caribbean politics, race, illicit trade, Islamic extremism, decolonization, and discourse analysis. Through his work, Dr. Figuera seeks to challenge dominant narratives, promote critical thought, and contribute to the development of alternative frameworks for understanding Caribbean society and liberation. Dr. Darius Figuera, thank you so much for coming back on the program this morning. You are always welcome.
Thank you, my sister. It's a pleasure.
Good to have you. Thank you for taking the time. A lot has been happening, Dr. Figuera, and we want to start at sort of a breaking news, if you will, because we're hearing news out of the United States that in Nassau, that is Long Island, that we're seeing that there has been some arrests made of Jamaicans, we're told, in a dragnet. And it's interesting because the Gleaner, for example, is reporting that they have been, the identifications there. 6 Jamaican men accused of being members of a violent street gang in Nassau County in Long Island, New York, in the United States, have been arrested and charged with gun trafficking and gun offenses. We are being told that these men are connected to, and this is the word they use, violent street gangs also in Jamaica. What's your initial response to this report coming out of Long Island, New York?
Well, after I read the reports that came out in various media, the first comment I made to myself was, a new order of the posse. That is entirely different from what we were exposed to in the first order of the posse. Remember, there was a time when America released a set of moral panics about the threat posed by the Jamaican posses in America.
Yes.
In fact, they created Trinidad in the mold of the original Jamaican posse model that they invented. And this was supposed to be a group of Jamaicans noted for their wanton violence and their aggressive act of exploitation of American white people, which made the Jamaican posse in its first manifestation a grave threat to the heartland, therefore meriting their eradication by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
When I read the various descriptions, certain things immediately jumped out at me. We are now talking about New York State.
Yes.
One, we are talking about people, a significant proportion of them, who have addresses in Queens,
Mm-hmm.
but the bust took place in Nassau County, Long Island. And I said to myself, the order of power of the illicit trade, this is proof that it has changed dramatically in New York State and New York City. Because Long Island was at one time the domain of American organized crime. The next thing I noticed is that these individuals were moving illicit weapons made in America, purchased in American states with loose laws concerning weapon possession, unlike New York State and New York City especially. So it was a return to the early trade of the 1970s in New York, where you will leave New York for a Saturday night special. You will go to Georgia, purchase your guns, smuggle them into New York and sell them in New York because of the very strict weapon laws in New York City. There was always a market for illicit guns. What I note about this group is that you are there to make money. You are not there to terrorize. They stuck in this talk about violent street gang to bring out the moral panic, going back to the first posse system. But it was not violence in the streets that pointed the fingers to the group. It was by happenstance that you stumbled upon a well-disciplined, orchestrated, multi-product, organized crime group. Because it wasn't only illicit weapons, there was illicit drugs.
Because it's interesting that they say this, as you say, happenstance. There's a traffic stop in 2025. And it is during this is the traffic stop in 2025 that leads you to this organized group. And it seems to me by reading some of the other reports that there had to be, and they've mentioned this, I think, serious infiltration into the group by DEA, CIA, you name it, ICE, and so on, because they've actually said that the group was infiltrated and they ended up selling, according to some of the reports, weapons and drugs to United States operatives. So you're saying just the personality of this gang, you're saying this is not a violent street gang. This is an organized group. This is an organization that is... tell us the characteristic that you are picking up from this group.
From what I have read and analyzed, they are showing, they exhibited the discipline of the new order of power that is exerting hegemony over New York City and New York State today. That is Pax Mexicana. They are exhibiting all of the discipline. And what is going to happen is that you are going to jail this cell that you have penetrated, but you can go no further in the organizational line because of the cell structure of Pax Mexicana's business model and the fact that you run your business on a need-to-know basis. So this cell that you have dismembered cannot give up the rest of the organization.
Because one of the things that I've looked at, Dr. Figueroa, was Are there? Cause they infiltrated this cell since 2025, and one of the things that I'm looking at is, are there any corresponding arrests in Jamaica? And I've gone through scouring the media to see, did we hear anything that seems to be related to what's happening there? Because they say this is an Jamaican international gang. You're saying exhibiting the characteristics of Pax Mexicana. And can I just draw a line to say, underscore this, that in all of the conversations that we have had over the few years that we've been speaking, you have pointed to this new Pax Mexicana or Pax Colombiana, the struggle between, but also the connection back to the United States. And how it is morphing and how it has morphed and what it has morphed into. So what we're seeing is exactly what you have been talking about. Now I hear you saying, this is it. This is just a cell. You have dismantled that. It's not going to take you anywhere else because of the nature of Pax Mexicana. So are we not going to see corresponding arrests, because they say this is an international Jamaican gang here in Jamaica?
If they were under the Colombian order of power, they would have penetrated right back to the capo. Because the way the Colombians do business, the capo controls everything. The product, the washing of the money, the transportation of the illicit products, the selling of the illicit products, everything goes back to the capo. And those who are on the front line selling know who is the capo. So that is how you dismember them. But with the Mexicans, you don't know who is calling the shots. The entire thing is cellular in structure, and you work on a need-to-know basis because they have sent generations to the best business schools in the world, and they have learned the theory of redundancy well.
Let us underscore also that they have already gone into court and they have all pled not guilty. And so these are the pleadings from the 6 men charged in one of the largest narcotics and firearms trafficking bust in Nassau County. That's in Long Island. If you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see that Peter has put the information up there, and you've gone to the DEA website. Peter, this is where this is coming from. Headline from the DEA, one of the largest. And they're saying this is historic. This has never happened in Long Island before. This is historic. This is basically what they're saying. And they're making a point to say that this is an international Jamaican gang. This is the thing. Yeah. What does that mean in the wider context of things, especially when you think of the shield of the Americas and the rhetoric we're hearing from Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, and specifically Marco Rubio about security? We heard Carrie Lake with it recently too, about security in the Caribbean waters. What does this mean for Jamaica?
What it shows is that you have Jamaicans who are well integrated into Pax Mexicana. They are there in Nassau County to earn for the organization. That is the imperative of the organization. You must earn. The imperative is not killing. It is earning. And they were good earners. They will plead guilty. They will plead not guilty. If at a strategic moment the rule is you plead guilty, you take your jail, you shut your mouth, and they take care of your family. That's the rule.
But we have a not guilty plea from...
Yes, they will start off with not guilty.
And we've heard that there are about half of them who are, or 3 of them who are not legal in the United States, so they are in a different ICE custody at a different level. Mm-hmm. And I suppose I don't know what kind of pressure has been put on there. And then we're hearing others are on different kinds of visas and so on, but that these are all Jamaicans. The names have been released also. We won't go through the names this morning. But how might America respond, and in terms of what leverage America continues to have? And this might seem like a small thing, but when you think of the shield of the Americas, the plans of the United States through the Donroe Doctrine or the Monroe Doctrine, the militarization of the Caribbean waters and the pressure on Jamaica by the United States under the guise of security, including the Shield of the Americas, how might America pressure Jamaica on this one thing? And I'm going to ask you to hold that in your mind while I give you a scenario of what has happened over the last 2 weeks. Oh no, let me have you answer that, because we have 2 minutes before we take.
Yes, the problem America faces is that the Shield of the Americas was not devised to tackle the illicit trades as it exists today. Anything you read concerning the Shield of the Americas, what they describe as the illicit trades of the Caribbean, is a misnomer. It never existed. It is a fabrication of masses' mind to justify a white supremacist, militarist, adventurous position, and we come to reconquer what is ours, our manifest destiny. So that is why they continue to talk about violent Jamaican, young and Jamaican, because they are stirring up the moral panic of the first posses. And that is the leverage. But the question Jamaicans must ask themselves, what does Jamaica have that America wants? Because it is clearly apparent that you are engaging with selected people because they have something you want. So in Trinidad and Tobago this morning, the news is, it is a done deal that the American AI centers will be built.
And
even though we all know our electrical grid and our water production and distribution system cannot take that blow, because our electricity distribution company and our water production distribution company are both bankrupt.
And yet Trinidad, and interestingly enough, because I've seen a report, and you can tell me how true this is, that this decision by Trinidad is also done within this context of the Shield of the Americas. That's the framework within which this is being done. This is so?
Yes.
So Trinidad has now gone ahead and agreed to building one of the largest data centers for artificial intelligence in the region in Trinidad. We know how much water that is going to take, and I hear you saying Trinidad doesn't have the capacity, whether it is water or possibly land.
Yes. The both companies are bankrupt. The both grids need extensive investment to bring it into the 21st century. But that is what Massa wants, Massa gets. So we had the situation where the Prime Minister is saying where a AI center will be located. And a statement coming from the American Embassy in Trinidad saying, no, the best place for the AI center is not there, it's in Point Lisa.
So the government of Trinidad is saying one place, and the U.S. is saying, no, it can't be there. No. It has to be. And I suppose they're saying this because of where the water sources is. And this resembles the early 2010s or 2000s when China, when Jamaica under Portia Simpson Miller entered into a contract with China to construct the highways, North-South Highway and so on, and gave to China land of their choice. But it's interesting because Jamaica then came out when we started questioning that in this space. What land? Because we heard it was a roaring river, which is a watershed area that controls almost half of the island's water sources. That we raised the alarm. We spoke with the minister at the time, Omar Davies, and we were really, really angry about it. But then they came out and said, no, it was St. Catherine. But then China came out and said, no. We have surveyed the land, and it is the roaring river, Miami Bay, Civil Heights area, the place where Marcus Garvey, Mwalimu Marcus Mosiah Garvey was born, where his parents were enslaved. And now China did say they were going to build a Chinatown there, and they did say they were going to control the roaring river. And they have already changed the course of the roaring river, which controls half of the island's water sources. And they have already, they are in the process of building the largest Chinatown that we've seen in this side of the world. But it's interesting because Trinidad is shaping up to be a very similar situation where they're saying, no, we know the data center is going to take a lot of water, but this is where you're going to go. But America is saying, we have surveyed this land, and it's not there. It's going to be in another area. What can you tell us about that area, Dr. Figueres, that America is saying that this is where it should be?
Point Lisa is the area where all the downstream gas industries of Trinidad and Tobago is located.
Oh.
So it is a strategic imperative. So it has a grid and a water supply dedicated to it. Because on that industrial estate with the gas downstreamers, they use a lot of industrial water. They are the largest users of industrial water and electricity in Trinidad and Tobago. So he came up publicly and said, that is where we want it. But the question that arises with the data centers in Trinidad, are they Pentagon contractors? That's the question.
Who are the contractors?
Yes, if they are Pentagon contractors.
What does that mean?
That means they have the security clearance, and that means they have the protection of the United States security apparatus.
And this, of course, is being done under the Shield of the Americas.
Yes,
regardless of how we see the Shield of the Americas, because we're dismissive of it in principle. But they are rolling this out. And even as we go back to, say, the AI water crisis, we're looking at how much water this is going to take. We know that factually that the Caribbean cannot even begin to support the plans for AI and AI data centers across the Caribbean. You have raised a question, Dr. Darius, about Jamaica must answer this question also. What is it that the United States wants from Jamaica? But also I think the question is, what does Jamaica want from the United States? Because it appears to me as if Jamaica is angling or haggling for a position within the Shield of the Americas, similar to what Trinidad and Tobago has, and what Dominican Republic has, and also what Guyana has. This seems to be something that Jamaica itself is pushing for. I'm talking about the government of Jamaica, this JLP administration, not the people. Because the people don't even know what this is.
Well, what is happening? When I read the media reports on your the presentation your Deputy Prime Minister made in Peru, who is also your Minister of National Security.
Yes.
And when I read it was straight out of the same Shield of the Americas playbook that our Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar used to make a presentation in the House of Representatives of Trinidad and Tobago, where she stood up and justified our position in the Shield of America.
I want to pause for a minute and to call Jamaica to attention at this moment, because this is a moment that it's a make or break for the island. So I want to pause and to call Jamaica to attention and to say, if your family is not listening, ask them to tune in. Call your friends, ask them to tune into this conversation. Because you heard Dr. Figueroa mention Deputy Prime Minister Horace Chang and the speech he made at the 17th Conference of Ministers of Defense of the Americas, which was held in Cusco, Peru. It was held from the 7th to the 10th of July. I want, Dr. Deros, let me preface this question with something which I don't think that you're aware of. A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister of Jamaica posted on his social media pages, I follow him everywhere on his social media pages, and I saw him post that he will be going to the United States to collect an award, and that's connected to GIS or GPS or something. He was going to go collect that award, and then while he's out of Jamaica, Minister Babsy Grange would be in charge of government. So I found it strange, but he continued to say, because usually it's the Deputy Prime Minister, Horace Chang, but then he said, because while Minister Chang is on official business, so that caught my attention, because I said, if Minister Chang is going to be on official business, why is it that we know that the Prime Minister is going to go into America, where he's going to America, who is going to collect the award from, and the award that he's going to collect, but the only information we have on Mr. Chang is that he was going on official business. That's number one. Number two is that I checked the government news agency, I checked all the Minister of Information, the Ministry of Information, the Office of the Prime Minister, every other site. And they all reported on this, that the Prime Minister is going to collect the award, Minister Grange will be in charge of the government, and Mr. Chang would be on official business. No information about where he would be, what he was going to do, and why, just that he was going to be on official business. Then Nationwide News Network reported that Mr. Chang made a speech, the one you referred to, in Peru, and that he called for regional support on security, which is a similar speech, as you're pointing out, made by Kamala Persad-Bissessar in Parliament. That speech was deleted from one of the Nationwide sites. I do not know why. I found it elsewhere on their Instagram. But what I found interesting is that there's a lot of reporting out of Peru on the entire conference, the 17th Conference of Ministers of Defense of the Americas. There's a lot of reporting out of some reporting out of the United States. But within the Caribbean, and specifically within Jamaica, there has been only, so far, up to last night, only Nationwide News Network, that one story that appeared one place and then was deleted, but then wasn't deleted from the Instagram page, which spoke to what the minister said and where he was. So media generally haven't really covered this. I want you to put that in perspective for me. Why do you think there is so much silence around this particular conference? Because it is, the 17th annual conference. There's no big deal about it. Obviously, it is being done within the context of the Shield of the Americas. We're seeing a lot of reporting on that. But why do you think that there's been so much silence, especially given the speech that Nationwide is reporting that was made by Dr. Horace Chang?
When you have silence, that means you are convinced that you have need to hide something. So what has happened is that the meeting in Peru went on at the most strategic time in the politics of Latin America. You have what is going on in Bolivia.
In Colombia.
what is going on in Colombia, where President Petro has indicated that the incumbent president won by straight electoral fraud. You have a new president coming into Peru. And most important, Brazil is coming under increasing pressure from Trump because you want Lula to lose the upcoming presidential and you want a white supremacist back in that position. So there is, while you are speaking about people who meddle in your politics, you are openly ensuring that your shield of the Americas go back to the Cold War mentality applied of by any means necessary, you will now have servile politicians running Latin American states. Now, it is clearly apparent that Venezuela is now an occupied colony of America. You sent in 500 Marines under the command of a Marine Major General as earthquake relief. And you have no intention to go. And you are, in fact, monitoring your military presence in Venezuela as we speak.
And military presence, it's interesting because we've had the USS Fort Lauderdale, of course the USS Nimitz was docked in Kingston Harbor, but not as significant as the USS Fort Lauderdale that was docked in Ocho Rios from June 18. It's not there now. It was there from June 18 until July 16. And I think up to today, since the USS Fort Lauderdale docked in Ocho Rios, not a single cruise ship has arrived in Ocho Rios. Remember that we have had cruise ships coming into Ocho Rios, in the Ocho Rios Pier, at least, Peter, 3 times per week? Listen, Ocho Rios is a tourist center. The cruise ships come in more than the buses run on the road. And a slight exaggeration. But since the USS Fort Lauderdale docked in the Ocho Rios Pier June 18 to July 16, not a single cruise ship has arrived. And this also demonstrates how fickle tourism is. Now, I do not know why there seems to be a random connection between that warship, which carries soldiers and warplanes and war paraphernalia. I do not know why there seems to be this random connection between the two things that nobody's asking any question about apart from in this space. But it seems to me as if those two things are connected, Dr. Figueroa.
Well, the length of time the ship was docked at Ocho Rios sent a message. And the logical deduction to make when faced with silence from the U.S. government is impending attack on Cuba.
And you think it's an attack on Cuba as opposed to the threat to China?
But all is part of the same strategy. So if you are running a cruise business, why are you going to put your business in jeopardy when a ship of war is so long docked at Ocho Rios to do what?
Well, that is the question. This is another thing for journalism in Jamaica, is that either we don't know, journalism is that our journalists are partying. And so that there is a civil society is funded into a funding crisis, and people are afraid to speak. Now, if you raise questions, they ask, "What do you want us to do? You're JLP." I remember when we raised questions about whether China was a strategic partner, a competitor, or a neocolonizer. that people were saying that we were PNP. Now we're raising questions about the current geopolitical situation ongoing, and now they're saying you're JLP because they want to shut you up. Either way, they want to shut you up. Dr. Figueroa, 33 countries, delegates from more than 30 countries across the America, including 33 participating countries, signed this final declaration at Cusco in Peru last week. The conference, they say, focused on regional defense. All right, I think we're not hearing. Are you hearing me, Dr. Figueres? Are you hearing me? All right, I think he's not hearing me. So let me take a quick. And just 9 minutes left in this segment with Dr. Darius Figueroa. But Dr. Figueroa is used to this, that when he's on, we will get disconnected or we will lose you or something of a sort. So welcome back in the last 8 minutes, Dr. Figueroa. But let me just say that we were saying before we got disconnected that 33 countries signed an agreement in Peru, including Jamaica. Obviously including Trinidad. There's so many Caribbean countries, 33 in all, the Shield of the Americas. And this is Latin America and the Caribbean have signed off to this agreement. Here in Jamaica, there's no reporting on it, no reporting on what has been signed, no reporting on what little or no reporting, with the exception of Nationwide, on what the minister said in Peru. What is the significance of that? That we do not know up to this day, and I don't know if you know in Trinidad, what was signed?
There has been no reporting in Trinidad, no statement from the government, nothing from the journalists as to what was the purpose of Peru and what was the outcome of that meeting. Nothing.
What is that saying to you?
What we all expect. We already know that Trinidad was one of the specially invited frontline members to the Caribbean. Remember, it's only Trinidad and Guyana were invited to the meeting in Kheru. That was a special occasion. All the rest who are coming in now are coming in after the fact. But Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana were the premier rapper. And we are seeing now the effects of it in Trinidad and Tobago.
Of course, as you mentioned before, the AI data centers, Trinidad has signed off on that. Do you have any idea, because you posed a question that Jamaica must answer this question, can you make an informed, or not so informed guess as to what does America want from Jamaica?
What I see is Jamaica's geographic position to Cuba and the Dominican Republic and Haiti. Jamaica's geographic position vis-a-vis, and you have to add the Bahamas, demands that Jamaica be under the heel of the master to the north. So that is the obvious reason that you want uniformity of purpose. You want uniformity of civility. What Jamaica gets out of it, I really don't know. Because what happens is that the problem with dealing with the Trump administration is that it comes up with these out of the blue, hairy-fairy kind of agenda. So apparently, the revealed agenda for Venezuela now is that the revealed agenda for Venezuela now is to talk about the 51st state.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Delcy Rodriguez has to be actually now going to the Venezuelan people and saying that there is nothing about 51st state.
So
So
there.
she is,
Yes, go
so
ahead.
she is constantly on the defensive. So while she is speaking of the 51st state, what is in fact happening is that Venezuela is now a protectorate. So does Jamaicans want that sort of relationship where you lose every vestige of your sovereignty and you are now a more than a new colony, you are now a colony?
I think Jamaica has made
What
that
do you
decision.
feel?
Yes,
You're
Jamaica.
getting cards by the million?
Yeah, the administration seemed to have made the decision. The conflict is between China, and so the Cold War is being fought also here in Jamaica. Another interesting situation that is developing is that on the heels of the executive order signed by Donald Trump, President Trump, regarding I think an executive order that has affected shipping goods and supplies on charitable goods to Cuba, that we have here in Jamaica as we speak. I think it's a French vessel or another vessel that cannot move, and we have at the minute in the Kingston port, containers of relief supplies for Cuba that has been sitting on the port for weeks now because of an executive order signed by Trump. So when you talk about what Jamaica wants and is doing, and the decisions that Jamaica has made, this is quite an interesting situation that is unfolding, because we're hearing the rhetoric from the political platforms, but the reality on the ground is that we have goods spoiling in the Kingston Harbor that cannot get to Cuba.
Yes. Jamaica is in the front line of the agenda to overthrow the Cuban government.
Wow.
In time for the November midterm elections. That is Rubio's last dance. So what is happening is that there is this total commitment to overthrow the Cuban government by any means necessary. And we're waiting to see when the military intervention rolls out. But the problem with that is, the talk is now, is that you are committed to military intervention against Iran in the Straits of Hormuz.
And as we speak,
So how much wars are you going to fight simultaneously?
and we haven't mentioned fighting with NATO against Russia. But so the executive order I mentioned, Executive Order 14404, issued on May 1, U.S. President Donald Trump signed the executive order significantly expanding U.S. sanctions against Cuba and those supporting the Cuban government. The order creates a new sanction regime that operates alongside the long-standing Cuban embargo. So it allows the U.S. Treasury and the State Department to impose sanctions on foreign non-U.S. individuals and entities, not just Cuban nationals, if they are connected to specific activities, including Cuba. This is the executive order that is also impacting Jamaica. So they're targeting energy, defense, metals and mining, finances, and so on. But let me just go down quickly, because the French shipping company CGM has announced the suspension of all cargo bookings to and from Cuba following the new U.S. sanctions issued on May 1. And as a result, the suspension has left dozens of containers destined for Cuba stranded at the port of Kingston. CGM said affected shipments would either have to return to their original ports, be transferred to another shipping company, but both options would create additional costs for exporters and humanitarian organizations. So this is a chokehold on Cuba,
yes.
And Jamaica is in the middle of this.
And what has happened is that all of the CARICOM countries who export to Cuba, you recognize we are now dead in the water.
This is madness at a level that we can't even begin to comprehend. This includes medical supplies, this includes food, this includes, and then we are participating in this because we fear.
And what is happening, your unilateral illegal coercive measures, they're not stopping China and Russia from sailing to and from Cuba because they have beaten your sanctions. They have their own shipping companies who don't use US dollars and don't call at your ports. But it is this reckless white supremacist military adventurism that reminds me so much every day of the Nazi regime in Germany, 39 to 45 and the World War.
And we have so much more to talk about that because we see what's happening with the ICC. We're hearing now about domestic left-wing domestic terrorists and all of that. There are some things happening that are phenomenal. We're going to go through them throughout the morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Darius Figueroa, as always.
Thank you.
A great help to us understanding the geopolitical issues as they unfold and connecting them back to us, to we the people. Thank you so much, Dr. Figueroa.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. 9. Thank you for joining us on the internet at irefm.net. Remember, we're streaming live across all of our social media platforms. So you can catch us on YouTube, IG, Facebook, and wherever you are on your social media platforms. We're there too, all right? irefm.net, irefm, irefmja, irefm_ja. And I'm looking at Peter because there's a whole lot of them, right? There are a whole lot of them. Thank you so much, Peter. Oh, yeah. They're on the screen if you're watching us on YouTube. But if you're listening to us on the 107s, then tell your friend. And you too can watch us on the live stream. All right. We're into the next segment of our program. We mentioned earlier that this week, from last week Sunday to this Sunday, has been a very, very active moment geopolitically. And we're going to go into some of those later on. One we mentioned with Dr. Figueroa just now is what we see happening with the ICC now. I have been one of those persons in this space who from the early 2010s has been calling for the dismantling of the ICC because they went on only after certain countries and not others. And so it didn't make much sense to me. So I can't say I disagree with Marco Rubio, and I don't think I've ever agreed with him on anything. So we see that call. We're also seeing from Stephen Miller another situation developing where he has announced left-wing domestic terrorism. Now, what this means can only be answered in the book 1984 by George Orwell. I don't know if there's any other book that tells you about it. But if you haven't read 1984, this is about time for you to begin to read that. That's on our Running African book club reading list. We've been reading that. We haven't taken it off the list. It is very important to get a copy now and read it. That's how you understand what's happening here. And so we're seeing the escalation that's happening also in West Asia. We're seeing the escalation that's happening also in between Russia and Ukraine. We're looking at that closely. There is a change of government in the United Kingdom. What does it mean, if anything? Well, we had a big announcement last night or yesterday sometime that Burnham is withdrawing or, pulling back the digital ID situation. It means nothing. That is just smoke and mirrors, nothing at all. So that's one thing. And so there are a whole lot of stuff happening, and I'll take you through them later on, but pay some attention. There's also a ongoing conversation, about reparations, and we've been talking about what has been happening in Ghana, what's happening at CARICOM level, and also what's happening here in Jamaica. We still feel that the reparations movement has been hijacked by government and by persons who are really gatekeepers to ensure that it happens in the way that they want it to happen, not reparations, but that the whole process happens in the way they want it to happen, outside of the grassroots movement way that it should be developing. So we are totally against, as you know, a lot of what we see happening. We're also totally against, and my friend Bert Samuels has been on twice with me already, talking about the new plan and the new announcement coming out of the National Council for Reparations, where Minister Grange has announced that a delegation, including legal luminaries and others, historians and so on, will be heading to the United Kingdom to give some document or the other to King Charles to say, answer these questions or ask your Privy Council to answer these questions. We think that that could have gone to an international court. We think that that could have gone to the Governor General or to Andrew Holness, who is a member of the Privy Council in an advisory role. We think that delegation is a mistake, and we don't know who is funding it. Now, that being said, why are we talking about the monarch? Now, there is a very important book that I think we all should get a copy of. This book, The Crown's Silence. It's interesting because I read this book my daughter told me that I couldn't finish in 2 days, and I told her I can. I'm going to read half in the morning and half the next morning. And so I've read through the book, and beautiful, great work from the author, Professor Brooke Newman. Please get a copy of it, The Crown's Silence. I want to give you the full topic of the book. But right, it's on the screen for those who are watching online. I want us to focus on some of the conversations we're going to be having now, because the book argues that from the reign of Elizabeth I to, I think, William the Fourth, a period of about 270 years, successive English and later British monarchs were directly or indirectly involved in establishing, expanding, protecting, profiting from the transatlantic trade in Africans, the enslavement of Africans. The monarchy, Dr. Newman is arguing, was not merely a symbolic but actively supported slavery through royal charters, through investments, monopolies, and political backing. And she has the evidence to back up all that she has said in the book. Professor Brooke Newman is a professor of history at Virginia Commonwealth University and a fellow of the Royal Historical Society. She's an award-winning historian of early modern Britain and the British monarchy, with a research specialization in history and legacies of slavery. Her essays have appeared in The Guardian, Slate, The Washington Post, and Smithsonian Magazine, and many, many, many more. Go ahead and Google her while we're talking to her. She has joined me on the phone lines, and we're really, really happy to talk with her this morning. Professor Newman, a long introduction, but thank you so much for joining us inside of the Africa Forum this morning. All right, I'm not hearing it. I think that's my doing. Go ahead.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. All right, it's our pleasure. Tell us about a little bit first about what led to you writing this book, because there's been so much conversation, discussion about whether King James, for example, is somebody we talk about a lot in this space, was involved in slavery, and to the extent that he was, Elizabeth I, so and although there's so much out there, this is one of his seminal books that we've seen that really is walking us through each monarch and showing us exactly how they were involved. What led to you doing this?
So I have been researching and writing about the British Atlantic world and the Caribbean for about 20 years now. And my first book, which came out in 2018, published with Yale, was about the history of slavery and colonization in Jamaica. And so I wrote a book that covered about 200 years of Jamaican history. And while I was working on that book, I kept finding references to the monarchs, different monarchs, and different opinions that they were expressing to the Jamaica Assembly in different letters that were being sent. And I asked myself, why is there no book that looks at the monarchy over time? And as you already said, we've known, historians have for years written about the involvement of different monarchs. We know about the Royal African Company and so forth, but there was no book that really summarized all of this and put it together. And so that's what I set out to do. I really wrote the book not only that I wanted to read and that I wished already existed, but also that I thought people needed to know about. People, as in people all over the world, need to understand this history because it's important. And I think most people don't realize, whether they live in Jamaica or the United States or Britain, they don't realize the role that the monarchs played. The fact that this role was not, as you said, not just symbolic, that it was instrumental, that they were enforcers, that they were investors, that they were beneficiaries of slavery. And so it's not just on Charles III now to acknowledge this history. It's that it's time to do something about it.
Why do you think that this information or this history has remained largely absent from mainstream public understanding? Because within Pan-African communities and African-centered communities, this is a conversation that's, par for the course. But generally, on a wider basis, no, not so. Why do you think that is so?
I think it has a lot to do with what we think about monarchy now. Monarchy now has been, defanged. It's ceremonial, they have soft power, they have billions of pounds, they have a ton of influence, but they don't have the kind of political power that they used to have, hundreds of years ago. And that's even influenced the way historians have assessed and researched this history. And so when there's been, books written about the Royal African Company or about slavery in the Atlantic world, people will mention, including historians, will mention monarchs here and there. But because of their position and how it declined over time, there was always an assumption that this is about the state. This is about the British government and what the British government did, not really about necessarily the monarchs. And so in some ways, we have given them a free pass, the monarchy, by kind of taking them away from their central role in this history and looking at how even as their power declined over time, they were still involved, they were still profiting, and they were still defending not only the transatlantic slave trade, but the institution of slavery itself. And I think that it's both about the discipline of history and the stories we tell, but also how this story is taught in schools. It's mostly a story focused on abolition in the 19th century and, really ignoring what happened before.
All right, let me take a quick break and come back. And so what's interesting about this is that this has come at a time when the reparations conversation is really heightened in an escalation, and we see movements everywhere, including on the continent of Africa. How deeply, Professor Newman, was the monarch involved? And before you go there, because why you mentioned the government as opposed to the monarchy, so we're looking at governments now and not necessarily the monarchy. Help us to make that distinction and why that distinction necessary and important.
The distinction matters because Britain has a constitutional monarchy, and this is part of history. It came after the Glorious Revolution, the late 17th century, and from essentially the late 17th century to now, Parliament has reigned supreme. The power of the monarchy, the political influence of the monarchy has diminished. And so we have to acknowledge that and the limitations of the monarch's role in the current system, the current political system. But at the same time, I think it's really important to stress that the British state, the government itself, the machinery of government was intertwined with the monarchy and has been for centuries. And so when you think about this long history, one of the things I think most people don't realize is that it is the monarchy itself that launches England fully into the transatlantic slave trade in the 17th century, that founds the Royal African Company, which is why it's called the Royal African Company, sinks money into it, invests the Navy in transporting enslaved people to places like Barbados and Jamaica in the 17th century, and also defending the transatlantic slave trade by having convoy protection, protecting the slaving vessels as they're moving from West Africa to the Caribbean. And so they are not only investing in this, providing material support for the slave trade, they're also getting money directly as investors who own stock in the slave trading company. But also, because they are on the throne, they are getting the customs revenue that is being produced by enslaved people who are producing agricultural products like sugar, like tobacco, indigo, eventually cotton, ginger, all of these products that we associate with plantation slavery. The monarchy makes money off of those products. So they're making money both on the front end and the back end of the transatlantic slave trade. And even after the power of the monarchy has diminished, the monarchy itself is still benefiting from this larger machinery of empire that they have been instrumental in setting up.
One of the things that I want to do in the short time that we have, and I hope that you're able to walk through this with us. I've gone through the book and I've kind of taken out some of the main points that I think you're making there, and we're putting those up on the screen. If you disagree with anything as you look, please let us know. But generally, it's what you have literally gone in and written and created those posters. The book is called The Crowned Silence, The Hidden History of Slavery and the British Monarchy. One of the things I want you to do for us, Prof, is to walk us through the monarchs. That made a difference for me. I mean, I'm a student of history. I've been doing this for a very, very long time, but the difference that this made was phenomenal. I went as far as to go look at the people again. And you're pointing to us that this started a long time ago, not here with Charles III, but at you start with Elizabeth I, and I want you to walk us through those monarchs to say how deeply they were involved, what they actually did, and how that escalated into what we saw all the way up to the 1800s.
Yes, and honestly, that is a large task to take a 400-something page book and distill it very briefly. But I think one way to think about it, and one of the things that I do in the book, is divide it into parts. So part one is really the origins of this system and royal involvement. And so that looks at the Tudor and early Stuart monarchs. So you have Elizabeth I, and she is someone who has inherited the throne. In her 20s, she's inherited a kingdom that is divided religiously, politically, and that is also strapped financially. And so she's investing in, as she can, in lots of different enterprising overseas commercial voyages. And in the 1560s, John Hawkins comes to her and essentially proposes that he is going to transport enslaved Africans from modern-day Sierra Leone to Spanish Hispaniola and essentially sell them into slavery. And if she will lend him vessels and men and supplies, she will get a cut. And she supports this, and she knows that she is explicitly investing in a slaving voyage. And I think this is a really critical point, because prior to this moment, monarchs, including previous monarchs, had invested in voyages of discovery and commerce to West Africa. But this was the first voyage where we have records that indicate that this is a monarch who knows exactly what she's doing, that she's investing in human beings being sold into slavery. And she's having fun with that.
And I did history all the way through high school, and European history in particular, and how this is taught is, or it was taught to us. I don't know if there's some revisionist history now that is telling the truth, and with your book I think it will make a difference too. That she was more of a passive person who just, sitting by and Hawkins want this, and you're hardly even paying attention. But you're saying she was actively involved.
Yeah, I mean, she absolutely knew what she was doing. She gave him one 700-ton vessel for his second voyage. When he returned with jewels and animal hides and pearls and sugar and tobacco, and she received the rewards of that slaving voyage For the next voyage, his third voyage, she gives him two royal vessels. And I think this is a point I make in the book, this matters because she had a very modest navy at that time. This is not a woman who had hundreds of ships at her disposal. She only had a couple dozen ships that were actually active and seaworthy. And she's giving him two of these vessels, and they have the ability to fly the royal standard. At the same time, she's very clever because she can deny, which she does, to the Spanish ambassador, the Portuguese ambassador, that this wasn't her idea, that this was all Hawkins. And so part of the reason the story is told the way it is because that's how Elizabeth wanted the story to be told. She wanted us to believe that she wasn't really that involved. And it was a very effective story. And then later in the 18th and 19th centuries, abolitionists actively changed the narrative and claimed that she was against slavery and that she actually thought that enslavers might be punished by God. And there's no record that she ever said that. And so a lot of what we think we know about some of these early royals involved in slavery is based on misconception and I think explicit attempts to hide their involvement. So after Elizabeth, there's King James, who takes the throne in 1603. He is someone who is much more involved in kind of wining and dining and spending money. But because he's spending so much money and he's also trying to make peace with the Spanish, he is pretty happy to make money however he can. And one of the things that's kind of fascinating about him is that he's taking revenue that England is getting from tobacco. And so some of this tobacco, much of it is coming from the Spanish, but the Spanish are already enslaving Africans. And so even before the English, create Jamestown, create plantation colonies, and start growing their own tobacco and importing enslaved people to work it, they're already benefiting financially from slavery in Spanish America, in the Spanish Caribbean. And a lot of that customs revenue he ends up giving to his wife, Queen Anne, who uses that money to buy land, to buy jewels, to buy clothing. And so the royals are benefiting from slavery even before they have an empire, which I think is a part of the story that most people don't know. He also ends up creating a charter for a company, the Guinea Company. They initially are not interested necessarily in slavery. They're interested in dealing in products that are already in high demand in Europe. So stuff like dyewoods. There's a lot of wood that you can purchase in West Africa that you can use to make a very high quality red dye in Europe in the 17th century. Also, elephant tusks, ivory, spices, obviously gold, very obsessed with getting gold. But they're not as successful as they want to be because there's a lot of competition from especially the Dutch in this period. And as eventually the English start to colonize the mainland of North America and the Caribbean, places like Barbados, eventually the Guinea Company starts to realize that there is actually an opening here to deal in enslaved people. And so they try to pivot to sell people, but they're not that successful initially because they're just sort of getting started in this. But that, I think, is a key moment because it's pretty early. It's before the Royal African Company. It's before the English Civil War. They're already thinking about how can we make money off of human trafficking, specifically from Africa.
And this, of course, is King James the fourth and the first. Because he's Scotland and England, and he is also the King James of the Bible. So in Jamaica, evangelicals and Pentecostals and so on, they will go nowhere without their King James version. So this is the King James we're talking about, the King James of the Bible. I know the work of Hilary Beckles, for example, actually complements us in a great way because he shows in his book on Britain's Black Debt how the bishops argued during that time for slavery. And I think this is also critical in terms of what King James was doing. Should I take a break, sir? The sixth, King James the sixth. Peter, thank you, Peter. And he's the first of England, but King James is it the sixth of the Crown's silence hidden history of slavery and the British monarchy. And there is really a silence from the crown. Just to interrupt a bit in terms of the chronology we're going through, we had King Charles, on many different platforms, including Barbados, saying that slavery was abhorrent is the word that they choose. We have William coming into Jamaica and saying the heir to the throne, saying a very similar thing. Slavery was abhorrent. But for the most part, the silence extends to them also, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Because they're not actually addressing this history, they're not acknowledging this history or the role of the institution that they represent at all. Instead, they're just expressing regret and saying, this is a shameful history, or this is something that, we feel deeply, but that doesn't mean anything. There's no culpability there. It doesn't open any doors for conversations about restitution. And so they're very careful in the language that they use, and they're making sure that what they're saying is a statement of regret. And I talk about this at the end of my book, that this is something that Prince Albert essentially pioneers in 1840. He gives a speech, a very important speech, but the speech itself, one of the regrets that he has is the fact that, as he says, England has not fully abolished the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, despite, trying to be a leader in this struggle. And that is the struggle that they want to focus on. They don't want to focus on the struggle of enslaved people to essentially push for freedom, and then eventually after that to push for equal rights, and then eventually restitution. They want to focus on the struggle of Britain itself to abolish the slave trade, because that is a story that then puts them in a positive role.
Is there a moment, as we look at the different monarchs, and I know we don't have enough time to go through all the monarchs as we want to. I'll invite you back, please, because we can't do this in one sitting. As you said before, it's a really big book, and there's a lot there to unpack and to understand. But is there a moment, a monarch who stood out more than the others? And I know you spent some time on the Royal African Company and how important that was. Is there a moment among the monarchs that really stood out, that was definitive in terms of how the monarch patronage enabled slavery and involvement?
I think I'd like to say there's a couple of moments. There's the moment we're more familiar with, which we do have to mention because it's so critical, and that is Charles II and James II's involvement in first the Royal Adventurers, which is the company they initially fund and charter in the 1660s, and then the Royal African Company from 1672 on. This company is a company that they get together and essentially pioneer and invest in, and then King Charles, because he doesn't have any kind of liquid capital necessarily, even though he wants to invest in this company, he provides, like his predecessors, ships, men, and supplies, numbers of ships to get involved in the transatlantic slave trade. Both Charles II and James II issue proclamations essentially saying no one else can be involved in the transatlantic slave trade except for people who are investors in the Royal African Company. And this matters because what they're trying to do is essentially create a monopoly company that benefits the monarchy, and James, who eventually is the heir to the throne, the heir apparent, and then the next king. They're trying to create a closed system where they are the primary beneficiaries of the transatlantic slave trade as it is being launched. And this is something that the English mercantile community is very unhappy about. They see this as overplaying their hand, that you've got these monarchs who are essentially using their hereditary privilege to benefit themselves. They're not trying to benefit the country. They don't care about the fact that the monarchy is involved in slavery. That's not the issue. The issue is the fact that the monarchs and the royal family are making money off of this at the expense of their actual subjects. So you've got proclamations that are issued. There's also laws, slave laws, that are being passed in places like Barbados, slave codes, and then later in Jamaica and elsewhere, that they are rubber stamping through their Privy Council. So those laws are actually, in a lot of them, very different from what's going on in England. They're different from the common law, departing from common law. They're coming back to Britain. And rather than saying, we're going to reject these laws that are instituting chattel slavery, that are allowing people to be dehumanized, we're going to, pass these laws through because they're in the colonies, and that's fine, and that's how we will profit by creating people who are chattels, who can be essentially sold for debts, who can be inherited along with property. So they're doing all of these different things to profit from slavery. But then the second point I wanted to point to is that in the 18th century, when we shift to the new regime of the Hanoverian monarchs, I think there's an assumption like, okay, at this point, I'm talking about going from Queen Anne to George I, George II, and on with so many Georges, too many Georges.
All the way to the fourth, fifth.
Right. Yeah. But at that point, essentially, they're not as involved in the Royal African Company, but they're still getting tons of letters from the Royal African Company. They're still serving as honorary governors. They're getting involved in the South Sea Company. And the South Sea Company transports around 40,000 people from West Africa to the Spanish Americas. And many of those people first stop in Jamaica for, quote, refreshment, which is how the South Sea Company described what they did to these people, which was essentially put them in holding pens. And many of them died in this. This was a brutal slave trade that occurred with the South Sea Company as well. And George I and George II, not only were they honorary governors, both of them, of the South Sea Company, they were major investors in this company, and they knew that this was a company involved in the transatlantic slave trade. So we're not just looking at the Royal African Company in this story. There's multiple slave trading companies and multiple ways monarchs are making money off of slavery, and doing so knowingly and explicitly.
And so, as you mentioned earlier, and you've written in the book, the question of Britain's involvement in abolishing slavery, that comes up in a way in terms of even how we were taught, and in some of the history books still, as such a brilliant act. Such a really great act on the part of Britain. We heard, if you watch GB News now, for example, in the United Kingdom, this is all they talk about on the back of the reparations.
I don't watch it. They have invited me on, and I've said no thanks.
I do. Thank you. But I do. It's hard to watch, but you have to listen to them because it is phenomenal. What we heard from Nigel Farage, for example, just recently from Suella Braverman, and from so many others in terms of their response that the so-called colonies must be thankful for, in essence, slavery. But they always bring in the abolition question. Put that in perspective for us, because they do this to say, not just that Britain, has done what it and is no longer liable, but that the monarchy has done what it should have, and therefore has a clean conscience on slavery. No reparations, no apologies, nothing.
Well, this is, I think, a really fascinating moment because on the one hand, it's clear deflection what they're doing. They're trying to, this has all been essentially made part of the culture wars, this whole question of reparations. And so they're trying to create inflammatory dialogue around this issue. They're trying to take back the narrative by making all of these wild, unjustifiable claims. But I also think when you see a reaction like that, when you see that level of a backlash, it shows that there is momentum building, that there is clearly a case to be made, and they are afraid. They're running afraid, and that is why they're spouting all this ridiculous nonsense. And they're getting a lot of airtime because they're saying inflammatory things. But what's disturbing to me is that the fact that they have these platforms enables them to influence people. And there are people out there who maybe would be a little bit more open-minded, but because they subscribe to certain political beliefs, certain ideologies, they will out of hand believe that, this is not something we should be talking about. We shouldn't consider this. The silence should continue. Because essentially that's what they're arguing. We should not talk about this. We can't raise this. The response to my book was very telling in Britain. I would say the majority of the reviews were negative.
I've seen that.
Book.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why I really needed to read it for myself, because I thought if they are so upset about it, you would have touched a nerve, which certainly you did, and this is why I'm recommending the book again to our listeners, to a wider audience. Please get a copy of it, The Crowned Silence, Hidden History of Slavery and the British Monarchy. And this is why I'm also inviting you to come back, because we're just doing a general conversation now, but we want to go chapter by chapter. This is brilliant work. All right, so the story of that we see coming out of the UK. Now, I want to backtrack just a bit, because we're going through the monarchs really, really quickly. But closer to abolition, who do we see? And after abolition, did the royal family in any way, or members of the royal family, benefit from that compensation, or for those compensations that were given out?
So as we get closer to abolition, this is during the reign of George III. He has, this very long reign from 1760 to 1820. And the fascinating thing about George III, as he is someone who is deeply involved, as we all know, in the American Revolution, in the expansion of the British Empire overseas, he is also benefiting from enslaved people, primarily in a military way. At the time, in the 18th century, George III, George II, his predecessor, they owned outright enslaved people who were known as the king's slaves. And these were hundreds of people who, many of whom were worked at basically Royal Naval dockyards. And they were skilled laborers. They were owned by the crown. Later in the 18th century, thousands of people are purchased at an expense of around £1 million to serve in the West India regiments. And this is an outright purchase that they make in the name of the king. And it happens very late in the 1790s, when there's already a growing vocal abolition movement, and when the British public is actually becoming more sympathetic to abolition itself. So they're still in some ways doubling down on how can we benefit from the purchase of enslaved people, and also not just purchasing men to be in the military and perform these roles, they're also purchasing women to be their wives. So again, women are part of, and girls are part of this story, but so often forgotten. The role that they're playing, and they're just sort of being moved here and there and just given away, essentially to serve some kind of perfunctory role without anybody really thinking about it. George III is someone who, because of his role as a constitutional monarch, he does not come out and talk about the transatlantic slave trade. He doesn't say, I'm for slavery, I'm against slavery. But his third son, Prince William, the Duke of Clarence, does. He is in the House of Lords, and he is giving speeches. And these are pro-slavery speeches. He is buddy-buddy with the West India lobby. He is friends with all of these people in Britain who are part of essentially this community of people who have ties to the Caribbean in some way or other. Either they own plantations, or they have a share, or they're involved in some kind of commercial activity. He goes to meetings with them. They give him gifts. He's, giving all these speeches. They're then being printed. So as far as the public is concerned, the royal family is making it very clear that not only do they support the continuation of the transatlantic slave trade, they support slavery, the empire, sort of the machinery of empire, because what he argues in the House of Lords, and his speech is printed, is that without slavery and without the slave trade, Britain will essentially lose its place, in the hierarchy of empires. And that essentially without slavery and the slave trade, the wealth of the country and of the crown of everyone will decline. So this is not a monarchy or royal family that is in any way pro-abolition when this movement is getting started, and even as it's developing.
All right, hold for me. I'll take the final break. The Africa Forum, the final 8 or so minutes. Professor Brooke Newman is the author of the book, The Crowned Silence, Hidden History of Slavery and the British Monarchy. And basically, you've heard before at the beginning of this program that she's pointing out in the book that while we tend to focus on the merchants, the plantation owners, or Parliament, she's arguing that the Crown itself was deeply involved in establishing, expanding, and protecting the transatlantic trade in Africans, human trafficking. She talks about granting royal charters, the crown granting monarchs, granting royal charters to trading companies, financing and investing in overseas ventures, providing political and diplomatic protection, supporting military operations that secured English commercial interests, benefiting directly and indirectly from the profits generated by enslaved labor. And Professor Brooks, just in the last 5 minutes that we have, and I'd asked before, not quite sure if you'd responded to that, I think not, but that at abolition, there was compensation. To what extent did the royals and the royal family benefit from those compensation, from any or all?
1830s did not benefit the members of the royal family at that point, but part of that is because by 1831, all of the enslaved people who were considered, quote, the king's slaves had been emancipated. But this process was a process that took decades because during the abolition movement to abolish the transatlantic slave trade, so prior to 1807, and then in the aftermath of that, there was discussion within the government about how, okay, even though we are moving towards eventually abolishing the system and the transatlantic slave trade, technically speaking, the crown owns enslaved people. And this was awkward. And this was something that people who are within the government are actually talking about. And so I mentioned this in my book, but it takes years and years and years before ultimately they emancipate people. And on the way, they are still benefiting and profiting directly from enslaved people. So in the Smithsonian article that I wrote, Smithsonian Magazine, it's also in the book, there is an auction that is held in Barbados in the 1820s that directly benefits King George IV. They are auctioning off people who are owned by the crown, and that money is going into his account. So that is the compensation, essentially, that he is getting. And it is prior to the 1830s official compensation that all these other enslavers are receiving. But as we know from the UCL Legacies of Slavery Project, the people who were compensated, the institutions, it was a wide swath of British society. So many different people, including, the modern day people like David Cameron, his descent, his ancestors. And so you've got all of these different people being compensated after the British government and the British monarchy also have already received money from this process.
And one of the things go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Now, one of the things that let me foreground some of the work that has been done because we've had a lot of those interviews in the space. Professor Vereen Shepherd, in particular, because in reading through the book, I'd literally hear her in my head because you build upon her work also when you talk about how wealth created through enslaved African labor significantly contributed to Britain's emergence as a global power. And I think we cannot understate that is important. Although Britain is an empire that has declined, or they like to say in decline, but has declined, to the extent that where it is now, there is still that history. What would you say are the arguments for reparations from the British monarchy itself?
Ooh, that's a good one. And actually, I think that is a question that most people don't ask me because they're much more interested in the British government because the British government has essentially power over the purse strings and political power. But you've also got the fact that the monarchy as an institution is culpable. And so, I can't tell King Charles what to do. He wouldn't listen to me anyway. But I think it's very clear that the king himself, that the royal family, they owe something to enslaved people based on the amount of investment and profit that they put into the transatlantic slave trade, into slavery itself over hundreds of years. And so, yes, he's a constitutional monarch. He has to work with the government. And thus far, whether it's been the Tories or the Labour Party, they have not been supportive of reparations, despite everything that people are doing in Britain, in CARICOM, all over the world, in Africa and Jamaica and elsewhere, to try to put pressure on them, they have really not wanted the political cost of supporting even an apology. But the king himself, he could use his influence and his soft power behind the scenes to, put some pressure on the incoming Burnham administration, potentially saying, this is something we could do. This could be part of his legacy. He's only going to be a transitional monarch.
I laugh at that because, sorry to interrupt, because I'm listening to the ongoing conversation now in Britain, right, regarding security for his son,
right,
Harry, and Ravek. And he's got representatives on Ravek, and he says, "Oh, I cannot intervene, and I can't even tell my own representative when they go to the Ravek meeting to vote in favor of my son." So if he's doing that with his own son, what are the chances of him putting any pressure on Burnham or anybody else?
Right.
For reparations.
That's why so much of what I'm saying is it's sort of what we wish he would do. It's what seems like the right thing to do. It doesn't mean he will. I mean, even the whole debate about Harry, I kept thinking, if you had billions of pounds and you wanted to see your grandchildren, why wouldn't you just say, don't worry, British public, I will use some of my money to fund the security necessary for my family to come visit for 2 days. But they don't do that. And it's so fascinating to me how we look to institutions like the monarchy for justice, for empathy, for all of these things, and they just seem to lack it in so many ways. Like, they're not in any way leading us in moral leadership. That is for sure.
That's for sure. What examples do we have anywhere else in terms of how reparations is fought and won? Because I know that we're going along a particular trajectory in terms of how we're engaging with Britain and the British monarchy. But quickly, in half a second, what example do we have? Because we're totally out of time.
Okay, the only thing I will say is that so far you've got the King of the Netherlands actually creating an independent commission to research these links, trying to address this, apologizing. It's not enough. And there's been some criticism, absolutely, from the top-down nature of that process. But it's a start. And I think that King Charles should be looking to the Netherlands to just think about what he could do within his own power. Sort of what could he do as a constitutional monarch to show that he does care about this history, that he knows it's real, that he's not just going to continue to ignore it. You have on the screen the reparations questions that Jamaica plans to send to him to talk to the Privy Council about. I think that will lead nowhere, to be honest. But I
agree with you.
It's a symbolic move.
Oh, it's not necessary.
I was hoping that by now Jamaica would have removed King Charles as head of state. I think that's a powerful message to send.
Yes.
But I think if this is what needs to happen in the interim, they're going to get, again, silence on this issue. I don't think they're going to shock us with anything positive coming from this. And I hope at that moment Jamaicans will realize.
Jamaicans realize it is a government that is doing. I don't know this dance.
The people with the authority to really move this issue forward and bring it to the public for a vote.
Oh, it's obfuscation. Thank you so much, Professor Newman. Some of the major questions addressed in the book, which you've heard. Why did England enter the Atlantic slave trade? That's there. What role did the monarchy play? You heard us talking about that. How did economic interests shape slavery? Why has the monarchy's involvement often been overlooked? How did slavery contribute to Britain's wealth and imperial expansion? The book is important. The Crown's Silence, Hidden History of Slavery and the British Monarchy. Thank you so much, Professor Newman. I hope you'll come back.
Oh, absolutely. It's been great talking with you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. All right, Professor Brooke Newman there. Get a copy of the book. I'm sorry I have it on Kindle, which is why I couldn't put it here. But you've got some books here, Caribbean Slavery in the Atlantic World. You've got Britain's Black Death, that's Hilary Beckles. You've got The Continent of Black Consciousness. This is Nana Erna Broadba. And there's so many. This is Vereen Shepherd and Hilary Beckles. This big one here, I'm pointing to it, Caribbean Slavery in the Atlantic World. And remember, I told you, do not be afraid. Get Britain's Black Debt by Hilary Beckles. It's important. All right, I think it's time for the cashpot draw. So listen up. Top draw dollars, pick 2, pick 3, pick 4. Hot pick and cashpot draws coming up right now. It's 8:30 and we are standing by for that. A lot more to come in the program, but we stand by for the cashpot draw. Later on, we're going to be speaking with the mayor of Lauderhill. Okay, here we go. Reports out of the United States basically saying that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has told CENTCOM to open the gates of hell on Iran, and what that means generally in terms of whether or not this is a formal declaration or the closest that we have come to a declaration of World War III. Interestingly, Al Jazeera is reporting just at this minute that Iran says the United States has attacked an under-construction nuclear power plant, while Kuwait says a power generation and water desalination plant has been targeted for a second time in 2 days. The U.S. Embassy in Jordan strongly advises citizens not to go to the airport or seaport in the city of Aqaba because of specific and credible threat. And I note that the United States government has issued a worldwide caution for its citizens overseas. Pay some attention to that. I'll send you the caution, how they've done it, Peter. You can have a look at it. It's an alert. It says worldwide caution, and it's for the United States citizens overseas. This is being sent to all embassies. It doesn't matter where you are, apparently. So this is the latest that we're getting. And from what we're hearing from Al Jazeera, they say Jordan's army says its forces have shot down 3 Iranian missiles, while a 4th fell in a remote area. No casualties or material damage have been reported. Kuwait says a power and water distillation plant has been targeted by Iran and that's just in the last 10 minutes, right? For the second time in 2 days, causing fire in some facilities. The Atomic Energy Organization of Iran says multiple projectiles hit the under construction Dakhovan nuclear power plant site in Khuzestan province. And this is according to local media. Trump says Republicans should add Iran to the Russia sanctions bill that imposes penalties on countries that buy Russian oil. Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani and Iraqi Prime Minister Ali Al Zaidi during talks in Doha, expressing the importance of dialogue to ensure freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. So the UN and Al Jazeera is also reporting that UN nuclear watchdog investigating reported attack on Iran's nuclear site. So all of this unfolding as we are on air. As I told you earlier this morning, the word from President Trump to the Department of War to CENTCOM is to open the gates of hell. That's basically what he has said. We do not, I know you all laugh at him, but I do not. I've never laughed at him in this space because everything that has been written in Project 2025 and all of the other reports that we've shown you since whenever, and especially in the last few months, they have done or are doing. And we have been literally walking you through what has happened over the last, from Sunday gone to Sunday now. 2 important things that we want to underscore in addition to everything else that we've said since morning. One is what Stephen Miller said 2 days ago, or was it yesterday, when he talked about left-wing terrorism. And I told you that what he said there, I know it's about 2 minutes, is it? Or less than 2 minutes? I know we have our very special guest waiting, so I can ask her about that actually. She's how many? 2.5 minutes. So let's hear Stephen Miller, White House advisor, whatever his title is today, has said this in the name from the White House, posted on the White House website and every other website that you can think of, government website. Listen to this. Let's hear what he said just before we go to mayor of the city of Lauderhill. I'm not hearing. Oh, okay. All right.
As a form of political terror.
Can you take it back from it? All right, 8:44.
Necessary and essential action of formally recognizing left-wing violence as a form of political terrorism that is a direct threat to our national security and the survival of our Republican form of government. President Trump issued a directive, in our parlance, it's called a National Security Presidential Memorandum, or NSPM, NSPM 7 to be exact, that directs for the first time in American history all of our law enforcement and intelligence agencies to work together to disrupt, identify, defund, debank, arrest, and prosecute these political terrorists that are operating in our country.
It's focusing on
all right, so I think
designation.
I think that's enough. Let me take a quick break. 5, let me tell you something. What he said just now, do not take it lightly. That's a very serious statement. And as I said earlier, the only way to understand this is to read George Orwell's 1984. It's dystopic, it's dystopia, it is as it sounds. And basically what they're about to do is to ensure that this little thing you call freedom of speech, this little thing that you think you have the freedom to talk out against or to speak out against injustice or to protest, that can easily be determined as left-wing terrorism. Let me go to the phone lines and to my very special guest who's on Zoom online. Denise Grant is the mayor of the city of Lauderhill. She is a distinguished Jamaican-American leader and an internationally recognized advocate for sustainable development. Elected mayor in 2025 after serving as vice mayor and commissioner since 2018. She has led transformative initiatives focused on economic growth, public safety, infrastructure, and community development. She has a background that includes leadership roles at McKinsey & Company, Boston Consulting Group, and a whole lot of other stuff. She is distinguished, as we said. She was honored with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Leadership Award for her outstanding commitment to advancing sustainable communities. We're very happy to have with us this passionate public servant, accomplished speaker, devoted mother, and a champion of innovation, collaboration, and opportunities that improve the lives of Lauderhill residents. Hi, Mayor Denise Grant.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you this morning?
I am well, if you two are well.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
I just like to say she's my Jamaican sister. I mean, we're meeting for the first time, but here you go.
Yes, definitely.
I'm pleased to meet
Born
you.
in Christiana.
Oh, Christiana. How did you move from Christiana, Manchester to mayor of a city of Lauderhill?
Okay, well, definitely an interesting journey. I was born in Manchester and left Manchester at the age of 4 to live in an area. I'm sure you're very much familiar with it, Independent City around that area, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I left Jamaica at the age of 9. So I have been in the United States practically my entire life. Oh. But the culture was always preserved. My mother did a very good job in doing that, making sure that we understood everything having to do with Jamaica, knowing the history of Jamaica, making sure we ate the right foods. The culture, the customs, they were all practiced at home. And so Jamaica has always been a part of me. And when I moved to Florida, as you know, South Florida is kind of like little Jamaica in many instances, right? So it was just very easy to assimilate. But while in Jersey, I lived in New Jersey. While there, no matter what role I was in, working at McKinsey & Company, being a corporate entity, I always found things to do outside of that, giving back to the community. It's just a part of who I am. And so I just advanced myself in that area. And so when I came down to Florida, it was very easy to do that as well. And then I saw an opportunity to run for office and studied it and figured out a way how to go about campaigning and doing all of those things that are necessary. And here I am now, mayor of the city of Lauderhill.
Wow, what a journey! And do you intend to go? Because I know for mayor, it is apolitical, right? It's not like a political appointment.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes, I'm glad that you know that. A lot of people ask that question.
Yes.
So yes, it is. It's nonpartisan. But if I decide to go for higher office, say at the state or, of course, federal level, I would have to choose a party. But I am a registered Democrat, and of course that would be the party that I would choose moving forward.
And congratulations on the awards, because I noted that you were awarded recently. I saw that those reports were in the local newspaper, I think, the Gleaner. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
What were those awards for? Because I just lost them. All right.
Oh, okay. So
Yes.
recently I was honored by Congress for the work that I have done in the city. And it's more so in particular to reforming our police department and developing a comprehensive plan to public safety. That was one of the things. And then in addition to that, we were able to bring down our taxes at a certain level, which is more bearable, of course, to our residents. So it's just the work that I have done and have been recognized on the national level for that.
I suppose because we see so much information on this, that policing in the United States, as almost everywhere, but there's an added component when you put in racism, and this is publicly and globally covered. What is the situation in Lauderhill and the areas that you are responsible for?
What was very important?
All right, I think we lost her for a minute. All right, just lost her for a minute. I'll ensure that we get you back online in a minute. Peter is working on that. Speaking with Denise Grant, the mayor of the city of Lauderhill. All right, no, we're not hearing you, Denise, so my apologies on that. All right, let me do this in the meantime. Oh, I can quickly tell you that we have been paying attention to the Student Loan Bureau and what the PAAC has said, right? The serious concerns. All right, Denise, we're not hearing you. I'm so sorry. I know I see she's talking still, but we're not hearing her. My apologies. All right, so there's serious concern raised during the Parliamentary Public Administration and Appropriations PAAC review of Jamaica's Student Loan Bureau. And if you're hearing me, Denise, we're not hearing you, so we're trying to get you back online. And in the meantime, I am just ensuring that we keep the pace, which is to say, all right, that the high student loan delinquency rates, this has come under review at the PAAC. And it's interesting because last week we were talking about student loan and we were talking about the interest rates and so on. But now we're hearing about the delinquency rates. The review highlighted that a significant number of graduates are struggling to repay their student loans. And wow, this is quite something, isn't it? The SLB Executive Director, Nikisha Walsh, indicated that some degree programs have extremely high delinquency rates, with some categories reportedly showing 80 to 90% of borrowers experiencing difficulty to pay. I do agree with Peter Bunting, you know, in terms of where we go with this. Because one of the things that he has said, and let me find that, one of the things that he has said, I think, is to look at degree programs that are not employable. A lot of countries are cutting degree programs. And let me see, he's saying, all right, so Peter Bunting has urged the Students' Loan Bureau to use its data to guide students away from degree programs that have poor employment outcomes and high loan repayment difficulties. I know he's getting some pushback on this, but I think that he's right, And this doesn't have to do just with AI, the convergence of the digital technologies. He's arguing that some university programs are no longer aligned with the labor market demands and may leave graduates with qualifications that do not translate into sustainable development or sustainable employment. He referred to global trends, including China's restructuring of university programs to focus more on emerging industries and technology-driven sectors. Well, China has gone and cut quite a few of its university courses. I see that happening across the world, actually, not just China. And I think we have to look again. But one of the things that bothers me, though, in Jamaica, just before I'm seeing Denise again, so I think she's back, but I'm not hearing her. But I think she's back. Are you hearing me now, Denise?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, brilliant. I'm not quite sure what happened, but we totally lost you, even though I could see you.
Okay.
And I'll tell you where. Thank you for staying and for coming back. I'll tell you where we lost you. It was at the point just as you started talking about policing and what the situation was in Lauderhill.
Yes, and thank you again. I'm not sure what happens, but for sure, I think what is important to us as the leaders in the city is making sure that the police department understands the community, that they can better serve the community once they understand the community. So what we recognize prior to coming on the dais as the commission is that a lot of the police officers were of a different persuasion in terms of race and so on. And so we realize that being that our population is predominantly Black, African Americans and Caribbeans, of course, that we wanted to make sure that the police officers were able to relate to the demographics in our community. And so we went about ensuring that we were hiring from within. We would now talk with the community, advise them that we can recruit from within the community, which was very important because community policing is also very important. We want, of course, the bad characters to be intimidated and afraid of our police department, because if it's just community policing, then forget it, right? They're communicating with the police department, but yet still there's no fear of God in them. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, the crime continues. But nevertheless, we wanted to make sure that community policing was also very important, and it was one of their priorities. So we have done a lot of work as it relates to that in terms of the recruitment, making sure that we have the correct people on the police force, considering that we have a young population as well, a lot of young children and teenagers. We want the right message. And so some of the programs that we've also advanced, like Unity in the Community, which is a program that bridges communication between the law enforcement and our youth, which is very, very important. Mm-hmm. So we've done stuff like that. We have made sure that the programs that we have as well within our city, that the police department also are aware of those programs and can implement that in the police department. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that we've done. We've put more police officers on the ground as well. We have identified various areas in our city that we consider that need a little bit more love and attention, and make sure that those particular areas are surveillanced and the police officers' presence are there more. Mm-hmm. And we're actually at the point where we've looked at our stats, and even though crime has gone down about 18%, it's still not significant enough, because one of the main things for us is persons to be able to live in the city and be able to live their best quality of life. Mm-hmm. And be in a community that they feel safe, that they can live, they can work, and they can also be entertained. So that is really what we're accomplishing in the city of Lauderhill. And we had to go into the police department to be able to do so. We've also hired a consultant, a police consultant who can come in and assess, to be able to give us some recommendations and things that we need to eradicate and other things that we can implement. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, we have our police chief is going to be retired shortly, and we are in the process of identifying a new police chief as well. So there's various things that have been done, and we are grateful that we're in the position that we can move these things forward. Yes.
And as you point out, Lauderhill, of course, can be called Little Jamaica. So let's focus a little bit on some of the issues and well, good and bad. We're looking at the challenges, not bad, but
good
the challenges.
And bad, right. Because when persons come to this country, they just don't bring themselves or just their family. They bring their customs and their cultures.
That's right.
And we have to be very mindful of that and how we deal with that. You're absolutely right.
So that the major challenges, and I know we want to foreground immigration, right? But hang on to immigration a minute and tell me about some of the major challenges in the city of Lauderhill, especially those that are directly connected to and related to the Jamaican community.
Okay, so some of the major challenge in the city of Lauderhill as a whole, I believe that public safety was a major one. And so that's why we tackled that when I came in as mayor in 2024. We recognized that there was an uptick in crime post-COVID. And that makes sense, right? If we were to go back and really sit and talk about it, analyze it. So it was a national uptick as it relates to crime. Speaking of Lauderhill, we recognize that. We know as well one of the main issues in the city that affects our Jamaican American community as well is the fact that there are more renters than we have homeowners. So there's a lot of transients that come into the city. So I believe it's 60% renters, 40% homeowners. So we're trying our very best as well to promote home ownership. Creating an environment that's conducive for success. Education is very important as well. Managing your credit, letting persons know that cash is indeed king, but credit in America is everything.
Wow.
So you want to make sure that you're managing that and you're maintaining that. And what does that mean? So we have a lot of education and resources available to our residents to do so. Because we know as Jamaicans, when we go anywhere, our goal is not necessarily to conquer, but to succeed. And in order to do so, home ownership is also very important to that population. So we want to make sure that they just don't assimilate, but they're thriving in the process. And that's very important.
Hold for me, please, a quick break. And one of the things, of course, that she's underscoring is public safety and the work that she has done with her team as mayor to address those issues. Denise, immigration is really a big thing, and so many Jamaicans still continue regardless of the immigration policies and the changes to the immigration policies. But what are you seeing in Lauderhill in terms of how Jamaicans are managing or not? Does this come to you any at all? Do you have an idea as to what the current situation is?
Yes, although it's a federal issue, it impacts us on the local level as well. And so I do have a lot of persons in the city of Lauderhill and even just in South Florida altogether will reach out because they understand that we have a very large immigrant population. And so indeed we are dealing with those issues. What I primarily do is I connect with my congressional leader who can really assist in those areas, depending, of course, on what the issue is. We have a sister city that is called Lauderdale Lakes, and one of the commissioners there, she is the head of, I guess, what we would call the Immigration Transformation Initiative. And so what she does is on a monthly basis, she will have volunteers from immigration attorneys and others that will come to various areas and to various cities in Broward County, and they will deal with those immigration issues of residents. And so I actually have, my godson is from Haiti, and so he is now 18 years old and have some challenges as well, right? So she is helping with that. And I think most of the things is really to be educated and to know exactly what your status is and what you can and cannot do. That's very important. You'll be so surprised of persons who will come to us, but yet still they don't know what their situation is. You have to know exactly what is going on with your situation. And there is help out there. Unfortunately, things have changed. We understand what's happening on the federal level. I was listening in when you were talking earlier in terms of this potential war, World War III, that's may happen. So we are very much aware of the changes that have happened federally as it relates to immigration. But at the same token, there's still persons that are out there willing to help and can help. We just have to go to the right persons, the experts that are able to assist us. But it's sad altogether, I must tell you. We see a lot of people that are also being deported. There is a story which I'm sure that you're familiar with as well, with several Jamaican nationals that were deported to Africa.
Eswatini, I think 3 of them to Eswatini, yes. I'm hearing that 2 want to stay, and there's one that we haven't heard from yet.
One of them, his wife reached out to me as well. She sent me a text initially, and when I returned the call, she was explaining the situation to me. He was being held in Florida at one, I guess it was in Miami. And then they thought that he was going to be released for whatever reasons based on, I guess, what the attorney was mentioning, but then sent to what she said was he was sent to South Africa, and he was detained there. I think that was the main thing for her, is the fact that he wasn't sent there and being free to be able to do whatever is necessary to advance his life, but now being detained again. And so that is an issue. So I advised her to continue to work with her attorney. If that attorney is not giving her the information that she needs, there are others that are out there. But I also connected her to our congressional leader to be able to assist. And I know that she has been working with the Jamaican government as well to see if it's possible for him to return to Jamaica. Yeah.
How serious
so there's
is
a lot
this,
of uncertainty.
This third country deportation from where you sit, and it's a non-political question, but how serious is this, and what should Jamaicans in the United States, in Florida in particular, know about this and how to prepare themselves?
It's a very, very sad situation, and it's quite unique because this is the first that we have encountered this. So there's so many things that we're learning at the same time that we're actually experiencing it. But it's a sad situation, and I have had about 3 to 4 persons now that have been going through this. And it's quite, it's a challenge for us as leaders, because even though we're in a position where we're supposed to be able to help, oftentimes on the local level, our hands are tied. Our hands are tied, and persons may not fully understand that, where we cannot just jump in and write a letter and things change, or even go with them to their appointments to be able to endorse who they are as community leaders, or even being able to speak to their character. So it's hard, and I know that Jamaica is experiencing that as well, right? I know that there's a lot of controversy around it, and I'm really displeased with it, and I'm displeased as well when it comes to where we have Jamaican Americans, the diaspora that's being sent places that they're not accustomed to, that they're not familiar with, and don't understand the language, don't understand anything about that country, but yet still is just thrown in, and it's either sink or swim. And what do you expect? And how does that even help anything as it relates to, what America stands for? It's totally against what America stands for.
Do you know, because you said this is the third, or you've had 3 or 4, are they all from Jamaica who have reached out to you, or from other countries?
Yes, and there was one incident maybe about 6 months or so ago, and they were going to send this person to another country. And we had to jump in and call various individuals and the embassy in Washington, D.C. as well. to be able to get the right people in place that they can actually deport this individual back to the homeland of Jamaica versus sending elsewhere. We've seen pictures and we've heard stories of persons being sent to El Salvador. And those are just so disturbing in terms of how those individuals are being treated, not as humans, but really as animals. And so you don't want anyone that you know or don't know to be able to experience that. So we have a different challenge now in the United States of America. And even though at one point on the local level, we didn't really have to get so much involved when it came to immigration, now we do. And we have to be able to now partner with and work very closely with our senators, our congressional leaders to be able to help us through this process, because we have a 29% of our population are Jamaican nationals, and we have 12.5 are those from Haiti. So you can only imagine that we will and continue to experience these sort of things.
And who are they deporting in terms of their status?
Well, the information that we got from Washington was that individuals who have committed heinous crimes, right, and are in the country illegally. But we've had stories and we've heard of persons that they overstayed their visa, but they have been good citizens or good persons otherwise, going to school, paying their taxes, all of those things, working a good job, but yet still they are also on the list. So in my estimation, I don't believe that anyone is really safe. It's very, very, very important if you are in the United States of America that you come in with intentionality. You know exactly what your purpose is for being there, but also make sure that you know your status and you go through the process that is necessary to be able to be legal, because there was a time where persons will overlook that. Now they're unable to do that. The laws that are set in Florida by our governor as well is even if you're driving in a car with a person who is illegal, considered to be illegal, the driver can also be in trouble for that, right? And I can be removed from office if I am assisting individuals that they consider to be illegal too.
So these are
Removed
really
from
serious.
office.
These are serious times. I can just imagine that people are tense and
Absolutely.
anxious.
Leaders are tense. I talk and dialogue with our leaders all the time in the city and in other cities, and I'm telling you, a lot of them, they're not speaking out because they're not knowledgeable or they don't want to help, but there's a lot of fear that's associated as well. Fear of being removed from office, fear of their cities not being able to get funding, fear as well as it relates to their families. So we have to be mindful in terms of what we say and how we say it, right? So I think the key is to be able to educate your community as it relates to all the laws that are being passed down, things that are being enacted. You have to educate your community so that they know and that they can protect themselves as well. I think one of the places that I go more frequently are the churches, right? So churches are not just a place of worship, but they're resource centers. I consider them to be that. So educating the congregation, talking with the pastors so that they can deliver the message as it relates to what are the new laws that are now in the city of Lauderhill as well in Florida and the United States is extremely helpful. They have to be equipped with the knowledge, with the information.
Because as you talk about the churches, you mentioned earlier that if you're in a car with somebody who's considered illegal in the country, that you're liable. Does this also go for the church, for the pastor?
To a certain extent, but churches have always been a place where they have their own, because of their bylaws. If there's certain things in their bylaws, they can be protected for a certain period of time, right? And so ICE can't just go in and barge into a church. You're not supposed to do that. There are certain laws.
Although we have seen them doing that.
Nonprofits. Not supposed to do it, but there are times. So the main thing is that the pastors, the leaders of these places of worship need to know the facts and they need to understand what the laws are so that they can stand up for themselves and they can protect their congregants as well, right? It can also buy them time to be able to give their congregants information so that they can help themselves as well. So these are the sort of things, but I am telling you, the times have changed drastically. So as mentioned, if you're in a car with someone that is illegal and you're pulled over for whatever reasons and they find that out, you too can be in trouble, especially if you're an elected official. They have advised us that we indeed, assisting an illegal person, we can be removed from office. So persons are very pensive, they're tense, and they are very much concerned about the direction that things are going. I don't necessarily think at this particular time, especially with this climate, that you should fight back. You need to get the information and being able to convey that to your constituents. Information is very important. It helps to protect them. It also helps to inform them so that they can make preparations as it relates to their families.
And we're hearing from, because we just heard from Stephen Miller, but let me take a break, talking now about this new policy that's in place that is now being entrenched, which they are identifying as left-wing terrorism, which I'm not quite sure what the wider definition is, but let me take a break and come back to that. In America, and Denise Grant is on the phone lines with us. We're streaming live on YouTube, IG, and Facebook. We're on irfm.net, IRFM 107s, and wherever you get your, whichever platform you're on. It's interesting because we just heard Mayor Denise Grant we had a clip as you were coming on from Stephen Miller, where really, I think it was a July 16 or so conference on political violence that was called. We had the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, convening this conference. 66 countries attended. And the meeting was presented as a global effort against political violence. The discussions focused almost entirely on what they call left-wing activism and organizations. And then we had Stephen Miller, who we just called the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. That's the level at which he is. And he delivered some of the strongest rhetoric, as we heard just now, describing violent left-wing movements as enemies of civilization and calling for coordinated international action against them. It's interesting because he also says this is something now that is being written into, I don't know if it's law or I don't know what this is, but left-wing terrorism is now seen as political. And what do you understand by it? Help us to understand what he's saying, because it's dystopic.
So as you mentioned, these are being written into laws into various states, and I know that Florida is one of those states now that you have to be extremely mindful of what you say and how you say it, right? And I think one of the main things for us is to be able to figure out what does that mean in terms of political attack? How are they defining that? Because does that mean that our speech now, our freedom of speech is now being under attack as well? The ability to speak on behalf of your constituents is very important when you're an elected official. Extremely important when you're a community leader. That is why you are elected. You're elected to be their voice. You're elected to be the voice for the voiceless. And so now if you have to be extremely mindful in terms of what you say, I mean, of course, when it comes to, conversation, you have to be very diplomatic. You have to be smart in terms of how you deliver your message. But nevertheless, what is that message? Do you have to also be mindful of the message that you're delivering? Because the main thing for us is to be able to protect our constituents and to be able to ensure that we are advocates for them. So now what are we're being limited in terms of how we can display that. And so we have to be mindful of that. As elected officials, I think one of the main things that we need to do now is to study that a little bit more and to sit down and have those sort of dialogues with our colleagues to try to figure out exactly what they are saying and how that is defined. Because one of the things you don't want to do is to go against what they're saying too, where you'll be removed, then you can't help anyone. Then you can't help your community.
This is dystopic, to say the least, because one wonders, about Pan-Africanism, African-centeredness,
Yes.
activism, advocacy, and so on.
Advocacy, and all of those
Yeah.
things are being attacked and being challenged. And so I am very much sure that you have been watching what's happening too in Florida with DeSantis and all of that, and the laws that have been now enacted. We have to be very careful and mindful of all those things. So with Stephen Miller, I think we have to dig a little bit deeper to figure out exactly what he's saying and what does that political attack means that he speaks of, and ensure that our freedom of speech is not now being challenged once again.
I think we really do have to look at this. A few times you have mentioned in the conversation Haiti and the numbers in terms of the population of Lauderhill, temporary protected status removed by the U.S. Supreme Court from Haitians.
Yes.
How is that reflecting and impacting the Haitian community?
It's impacting in such a great way. Let me just, on a regular basis, we are now concerned with that diaspora not going to doctors because they're afraid of being asked for their status, not now sending their children to schools. A lot of churches are empty because they're afraid to go there because they don't know exactly what's going to happen. ICE can show up at any time. I've been at the bank and ICE just walk right in. Persons are so frantic, they're running out of the bank. This one lady fell, hurt herself, had to be sent to the hospital because of that. It's so much fear. It's like they're always just into that mindset of what can happen. They're going to be sent back, and sent back to what? We understand the state of Haiti and what's going on there. What are they being sent back to? And so now the state and the city of Lauderhill with our Haitian individuals is that they are so scared. They're scared to go to anything that we have in the city now. So say, for instance, we have a town hall meeting, which is open to the public. They are terrified of coming there because they don't know who they're encountering. And someone like myself, too, who will go to the schools and being able to say, okay, this is my information, please give to your parents so we can assist you with scholarships or whatever else they need. They now are so reluctant to get the help, to get the resources, because they're also afraid of who I am just because I work for the government. So we're having a hard time, definitely, not just in the city of Lauderhill, but South Florida altogether, that is hugely populated with Haitian Americans.
Messages are coming in like crazy since you've been on, left, right, and center. Here's one that says, most of the people they will be deporting is Islamic and Somalian. Do you see
well,
that?
They are definitely deporting Somalians as well. In South Florida, we don't have a huge population as it relates to Somalians, but we do have a huge population as it relates to Haitians. We have a huge population as it relates to persons that are from Venezuela and all of those other places. They basically, what we have seen is anyone that is out of status can be deported. So you just have to be extremely, extremely careful.
Yeah, and I think it's a misnomer to think, because obviously they have been foregrounding on a national scale, Somalia and Islam. But then when you go behind the scenes to look at those who are being deported through the third country national or the third country deportation, these are not Somalians or people who are Islamic.
No.
These are
a lot of people from Spanish countries and a lot of people from the
from the Caribbean
communities as well.
And so we're paying some attention to this. So that for Haiti, I think it's especially interesting because we hear people like Megyn Kelly, for example, on her podcast in the most vitriolic of way.
So distasteful.
Distasteful, saying, go home, we don't want you, go home. Then on the other hand, we have countries like Jamaica, where every time Haitians come in, we treat them like 15th class citizens. And we have now signed on to the third country deportation or the third country national through that MOU. But considering that Haiti has been removed from the temporary protected status.
Yes.
I don't know what you know, but what do you think about the idea of countries like Jamaica saying, okay, then we'll take third country nationals, but let them be Haitians?
So you're saying let them be Haitians, and then if they are Haitians, then of course they're not going to be treated fairly. Is that what you're saying?
Because you have this, thousands of Haitians who are
Yes.
now stateless in the
Yes.
United States, who are going to be deported to El Salvador and all across the world. And we have
Right.
countries like the Dominican Republic who say, we will take third country nationals, but we will not take Haitians. I think on the
Well,
flip,
they have been discriminated against.
but they wrote that into their
For
MOU.
so long, and it's a very
Yeah.
sad situation because Haitian Americans bring so much, especially to the United States. I know in the city of Lauderhill, we have our Haitian American residents. They add such value to the economy, just to the culture of the city. We have Haitian Americans that we don't want to just talk about in terms of job status, but are teachers or lawyers or doctors that bring so much to the city as well as to the United States. We're talking about mothers and fathers and people with families, the young children, and what is it that they teach their children in terms of confidence and purpose and destiny and assignment when they are being treated so poorly and the children are seeing this. It's really a sad situation. I don't know necessarily why. We can go back into the history of Haiti, and especially when it comes to Dominican Republic as well, as them being one country and then the separation. And so there's always that divide. But they're just so discriminated against across the world. And it's really unfortunate because these people, they are human beings just like we are, and they add so much value just like everyone else. So it's really unfortunate that the entire world now is adopting this type of mindset as it relates to Haitian nationals.
We're totally out of time, but another text is saying, my sister from the city of Lauderhill. And then she goes on to say, it's Moylene Samuel. She says, not hearing much about social programs, but we did carry the discussion off on a tangent because we spent a lot of time on
Yes.
immigration. So I'll give you a minute to talk a little bit about the social programs.
The social programs that are in the city of Lauderhill, we have a lot of programs. One of the main things for us to ensure that all of our residents have the resources that they need in order to have quality of life and to live their best lives possible. So I would encourage persons that live in the city of Lauderhill to go on our website, go on the City of Lauderhill website, and then you will see a lot of programs that will be able to assist all of our residents, from our seniors, our youth, and just residents all together. So please visit the City of Lauderhill and go through our Human Resource Department, which will link you now to our Grants Department and all the other departments to be able to see what is available to our residents.
Thank you so much, my sister, and I really do hope that we'll talk to you another time. Congratulations.
Yes,
on the
thank
work
you
that
kindly.
you're doing
This was
there.
great. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
So, and China, as global leaders in the new AI world order, you could hear that in the speech. He has done that. Whether or not how that plays out, it's yet to be seen, but we know that there's an AI race that is on, and we'll see how that goes. But I thought this conference was critical, was important, and we have to listen closely to what he says. It's interesting because it reminds me of the 1963 speech that the His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor Haile Selassie, gave at the United Nations, where that speech that ended with the war text or script that Bob Marley used to sing Until the Philosophy, right? So that speech, that's a longer speech than just that part that says, until the philosophy. But some of the very same words have been recalled and used by Xi Jinping, and you'll hear it. So let's listen to this. Let's listen to Xi Jinping of China speaking at the 2026 the 70th anniversary of the World Artificial Intelligence Conference, the WAIC. Wake.
尊敬的各位同事，
distinguished colleagues and guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends. 70 years ago, a group of young scholars proposed the concept of artificial intelligence for the first time at the Dartmouth workshop in New Hampshire of the United States. In the subsequent 70 years, AI scientists and researchers from around the world ventured into this unknown territory, forged ahead through twists and turns, and made breakthroughs with persistent hard work. 7 decades later today, amid the new wave of AI development, we are gathering by the Huangpu River to discuss how to promote AI globally for the positive, for good, and for humanity. All this makes our meeting highly important. On behalf of the Chinese government and people, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you all. In the course of history, the invention of the steam engine heralded the industrial civilization. The widespread access to electricity brightened up modern society. And the birth of the internet brought the entire world together. Each of these technological revolutions has profoundly reshaped our way of work and life, and enabled a giant leap in economic and social development. Today, major changes unseen in a century are accelerating across the world. The new round of technological revolution and industrial transformation is advancing at a faster pace. And the world has entered an unprecedented period of active innovation on AI technologies. Intelligent connectivity, human-machine collaboration, cross-sector integration, joint creation and sharing, and other intelligent technologies are unleashing enormous power. All this carries within it great opportunities, as well as challenges to governance. We human beings must answer the questions posed by our times. How to get along with thinking machines? How to ensure security when algorithm is part of decision making? How to tackle ethical challenges by technologies through adaptive governance? How to realize AI for all when the divide keeps widening? These questions demand serious consideration and real answers from the whole international community. In China's view, all countries should take a people-centered approach and develop AI for the positive and for good. We should ensure that AI is an important driver for shared prosperity and common security.
All right. Okay, so let's stop it there. It's about 19 minutes long, so you can pick up on this. But there are two things there that are critical. And as I said before, here we have Xi Jinping situating himself as the leader of the global AI New World Order. And interesting because I'm going to go out on a limb and said, he's drawing from a speech of His Imperial Majesty where he talks about quite a few things. He said, here we are, we must answer the questions posed by our times, which is similar to what the Majesty said at the United Nations in 1963, when he said, never before, we must answer the questions never before posed. We must look first to Almighty God, who has raised man above the animals and endowed him with intelligence and reason. We must put our faith in him that he will not desert or permit us to destroy humanity. This is the very same speech. He was talking about nuclear weapons. Xi Jinping is talking about artificial intelligence, but it's the very same speech. He says, that he will not desert us or permit us to destroy humanity, which he created in his image. And we must look into ourselves, into the depth of our souls. We must become something we have never been, and for which our education and experience and environment have ill prepared us. We must become bigger than we have been, more courageous, greater in spirit, larger in outlook. We must become members of a new race, overcoming petty prejudice, owing our ultimate allegiance not to nations, but to our fellow men and with the human community. Go back and listen to the speech from Xi Jinping. At times like these, great men really do emerge with profound ways of engaging the global world. And in the same way that His Majesty engaged the world, I see Xi Jinping doing the very same thing here. And not only doing the very same thing, but I maintain that it is the very same speech. And we can have a conversation about that, but word for word, line for line. I do have His Majesty's speech, and I suppose when we get some time, Peter, another time, we can carry both and have a conversation about them. But anyway, just to go back to the point, that this conference in China that happened on the weekend is one of the critical moments in our time. Go back and listen to what was said. Go back and pay some attention to how China is situating itself in this global AI race, because everything is connected. The AI data centers that we talked about earlier, and I know you've got some footage there on the water situation. Peter, one of the things that we raised with our brother, Professor Dr. Darius Figueroa, is, so we have Trinidad and Tobago, for example, signing off on an AI data center in Trinidad. And this is within the shield of the Americas. Remember that regardless of the extent to which you want to dismiss the shield of the Americas, we cannot dismiss the shield of the Americas, because this is swallowing the OAS, because remember, the rules-based order is ruptured, not just ruptured, but splintered. So it's swallowing the Organization of American States. It is swallowing the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. It is encompassing the Monroe Doctrine or the Donroe Doctrine. It is encompassing the Manifest Destiny, and all these security initiatives in Latin America and the Caribbean waters, all rolled into one. And for those who are in the inner sanctum of the shield of the Americas, then you get your special prize. And that's why Jamaica is taking third country nationals. That is why. All right. The AI water crisis, we've been telling you this for a very long time. Mother Samad was one of the persons in the 1990s who told us the water crisis is going to be a massive crisis, and the next war might very well be fought over water. She was right, wasn't she? Because you look at the Strait of Hormuz, you look at the Red Sea, you look at all the ports, everything that's happening now is connected to the maritime part of things, isn't it? So the global water crisis is up on us. But here's the thing. Jamaica has already given away most of its water sources: blue water, salt water, and fresh water. We have already lost most of our water sources to China, to Europe, and the United States, and to other private entities. We do not have access to our rivers. We do not have access to our sea. We do not have access to our blue holes. We do not have access to our water heads. We do not have access to our massive rivers. We have already signed those away. The water is important for the AI world order, because this is what you need. The data centers are going to take massive amount of water and electricity. We see that already being one of the contentions that's happening in the United States, in China, on the continent of Africa. And here in the Caribbean, already we have Trinidad talking about, not just talking, but signing off on an AI data center. And I've got some notes here regarding how the water works, or the facts. By 2030, AI data centers should consume water equal to the basic needs of 1.3 billion people in sub-Saharan Africa. Data centers use water directly for cooling and indirectly through electricity generation. Gigawatt scale AI facilities intensify competition for fresh water in a changing climate. Communities risk water stress while tech giants expand their digital empires. Water is becoming a strategic resource in the age of artificial intelligence. And we have the way forward that I'm not necessarily saying. But here's the situation. The bottom line is that we have to protect our water. We have to protect our water sources. And we have already lost so much. We have already lost so much. And we hear all kinds of platitudinous peroration spewing from the mouths of those who are in this current administration. But remember that the former administration did not protect our water sources, did not try to ensure, to invest in water, and now we are up on a crisis. This is the bottom line, We are up on a crisis. What do we do? What do we do? The answer is to protect what we have. It's also to take back what they have given up. Because here we are. There's a document on the screen, right? Industrial revolutions require resources. The first revolution, industrial revolution, depended on coal. The petroleum era depended on oil. The digital era depends on electricity and minerals, and the AI era increasingly depending on water. That is the bottom line. Who controls our water? Who controls our water sources? This is a question that we must face and we must begin to ask. Because remember, when you don't have water to drink, don't even talk about bathe. When you don't think about not having water to drink, and I see already in communities where water was flushy, that people are now without water and their water sources are all dried up. They tell us that it is climate change. But I put it to you that not really. What they have done is they have sold our water sources. They have, take for example, the Roaring River. The Roaring River water, and we have done so many programs, like hundreds of programs on the Roaring River in this program, in this space, and how important it was and is to half of Jamaica in terms of where we're getting our fresh water from. But they have gone ahead. We could not control. We could not stop them from giving the Roaring River, the water source, to China. China has already changed the course of the Roaring River. Also, the building of Chinatown that's happening in the watershed area of Roaring River. We told you before, because we got the experts coming to say, how does this, which parishes depend on the Roaring River? And if you cut down the trees and build a Chinatown, which parishes will be affected? Well, it's the entire Rio Bueno watershed. That is half of Jamaica. So where we are here in St. Anne fighting for the Roaring River, you might be in Clarendon not having any water, or Trelawney without water, or St. Mary for that matter. This is how it works. And then they turn around and tell you that it is climate change. This is where we're going to have to, it's nuanced, but it's not even so nuanced. We draw a line down the middle and say, but before you change the course of the Roaring River, we didn't have this problem. Not only that, we're booming. The construction industry is booming. And we see they're building in swamp areas, in mangrove swamps. They're cutting down mangrove swamps to build parking lots or to build communities or to build houses or whatever you're building in these mangrove areas, or to put road through the mangrove. Because you do not care, then you turn around and tell us that it is climate change, but you have built in the swamp. Do you know, we demonstrated, Peter, for nearly 1 year straight against what they were doing in all the way Discovery Bay, Runaway Bay, all that stretch of mangrove swamp that they were building, and they were building hotels. And the environmental impact assessment made no sense, because we know that if you build in the mangrove swamps, which are so critical to the environment, that it is going to feed back and blow back at us in some way. So here we are in a water crisis, but water is now being traded in some countries. We understand there's a whole situation now, water is being traded on the stock market and all kind of something. No, I'm laughing, but this is very serious. Water is a commodity. And here in Jamaica, listen to what they're saying, because they have already started talking about what they plan to do with water and about water and what it is going to cost you. But members say, we are people who run Goa River barefoot. And we have all kind of underground spring where we can drink from. Just put a bamboo there and just drink from it, and we're good same way. That's the people we are. But those springs have dried up, not because of climate change, but because you've sold the water head, the river head. You sell the river head and then block it up right there, so it's not coming where it used to go. That is basically what is happening in Jamaica. Then them turn around and tell us that it is climate change. We're going to have a kind of conversation about this. But here's the situation. Remember that the fight for our water sources is a fight that we're going to have. We cannot escape this fight. To take back all the riverhead them, all the rivers, access to the ocean, because that's a security risk. They have blocked us off from the ocean, and they can come at us with USS Fort Lauderdale and USS Nimitz, and we do not have a clue. Not only that, we don't know where we're going. That's basically the dystopic time that we're living in. Goodness gracious. We're in a number 1 year. They have blocked off, for those who are watching, that's Little Duns River on the screen. The fight for our water sources continue. I am at a loss for words right now, because I recognize how serious this is. We spent, 15 years, the better part of 15 years, pointing out that once the Roaring River is gone, then our problems in terms of access to water will start. Well, here we are. All right. So I think that this year is 2026. It's a number 1 year. So let's do with it what we can do with it. Listen again to President Xi Jinping and that impassioned open speech at the 2026 World Artificial Intelligence Conference in Shanghai, in the vein and the tenor reminiscent of His Imperial Majesty the Emperor Haile Selassie in 1963. And you heard him talking about building a just and equitable AI global governance system guided by human wisdom for the good of humanity. He also warned against AI domination by any single country. But he's coming forward and with China as a leader. Africa, of course, remains the single most complete and comprehensive repository of all elements, all conditions indispensable for human survival. And Africa finds itself in the crosshairs of this changing hegemonic domain. We have technocracy coming out on us. In the speech from Xi Jinping, we didn't carry that part of it, he speaks about transhumanism, man and machine, man emerging into machine, man blending into machine. It's 19 minutes. Go and listen to it. He is not the first, but he foregrounds transhumanism as part of where we're going. So technocolonialism is what he's speaking out against. Techno-fascism, technocracy, transhumanism. This is where we're going. Our intention is not to stop them, because we don't even think we can stop them, because what is about to happen has already happened. Our intention is to protect ourselves, to put ourselves in charge of ourselves, to protect ourselves and our children, and to carve out a piece of land that has water. We'll take care of the rest. Because at the end of the day, water is the most important. We must put to the best use the rich heritage that we have, the genetic memory that we have, because we have a memory of the past. And all we have to do is wake up our African brain so that we can live to the highest standards in the ways of our forefathers and our foremothers. So we return to Ma'at and we return to Ubuntu, because Hunu is also Ubuntu. The word Hunu, it means the same thing. Can we say Unu? Unu akom, unu ago, unu na akom? That word Unu, it's a Shona word. And it means I am because we are. That's what Unu means. So when we say Unu coming, that is the same word as Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a Bantu word, a Shona word, Shona, the whole Bantu languages. So here we go. We go back to Unu, and we go back to, like my father always preach at church, do not remove the old landmark. Because I just left it there, so do not remove the old landmark. I think of that message we need. I think my father used to preach it from the Bible. You know that message, Peter? Well, if we go look it up and see what it means. A minute. But basically, that's what's come to mind, right? We are putting ourselves in charge of ourselves. We understand that the New World Order is technocracy and transhumanism. It is technocolonialism. But our job is to put ourselves in charge of ourselves. Reminding you, I know that there are some things I need to quickly. iNation. iNation, you sent me something. All right? And if you could have just shoot it back to me so I don't have to search for it. All right. Isis, did you send me? Okay, yeah. So Inner City Dub presenting Roots Rockers Reggae Dub, recalling Frantz Fanon, the Liberation General. Turbulence, the DJ Architect will be there. That's tomorrow, Monday, July 20, 7 p.m. to midnight at Nation Lounge, and admission is love and light. All right. Recalling Frantz Fanon. That's tomorrow at iNation Lounge. So somebody's sending me, do not remove the old landmark. Let me see. Moylene, yeah, the words of it, do not remove the ancient landmark. Okay. You could have sent me the scripture too, because I know. How are you doing, Deacon? Welcome. Did you go to Sumfest?
No.
Did you hear about Sumfest?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. How was the turnout?
I heard that it was good.
Who win the clash?
I don't think it was a clash, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a clash.
Okay. Peter never got either, so we three didn't go.
Yeah.
Well, because we had to work this morning. So here we are. I don't think I would have go one way or the other, but we're there. What was the traffic light like?
That it was the same, you know. The same.
Backup business?
Yeah.
Wow. From every direction? Goodness gracious me. That is quite something. Well, anyway, I'm making way for you, who you're in, DJ Collision, for the big A. And let me just quickly remind our listeners, Erna Brodber's The Continent of Black Consciousness. This is a book to read. There you go, Collision. Here, look. You look at yourself. The Continent, Peter. By the way, Peter really is into this because Erna Brodber is Peter's auntie. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So Nana Erna Brodber, right, is Peter's auntie. But, yeah. Peter Brodber name, I don't remember. So anyway, The Continents of Black Consciousness on the History of the African Diaspora from Slavery to the Present Day. China into Africa, Trade, Aid, and Influence. Here we go. This is by Rothberg, edited by Rothberg. Then we have Hilary Beckles, Britain's Black Debt, Reparations for Caribbean Slavery and Native Genocide. I see you're very interested in that, so I may continue. Then we have Dragon in the Caribbean, China's Global Redimensioning, Challenges and Opportunities for the Caribbean by Richard Bernal. Ambassador Bernal, who is no longer with us, but we read this in our book club and he came and answered the questions from our students on that. And then this, everyone, Caribbean Slavery in the Atlantic World, a student reader, Vereen Shepard and Hilary Beckles. Vereen and Hilary Beckles, goodness gracious, take it. Oh. No, my daughter tells me, so she see a history teacher at our school walking up and down with this book. And she said, she wondered, how he managed because... Yeah, man. Congratulations, Vereen Shepard and Hilary Beckles. Anyway, we make way for DJ Collision, who's in for the big A. Thank you on behalf of Peter. Thank you, Peter, for being a producer, technical operator, console operator, a videographer, a floor manager. What else did you do? This everything. I mean, everything. In-studio producer. Thank you, Antoinette Brown. Thank you, Khadijah, who is at the desk. And we'll see you next week, inshallah. Thank you for listening. Thank you so much. See you next week.